Good evening. It is 7:35. We're going to welcome to the meeting, February 26th, and 7:35. We're going to do the pledge and then get started with our meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Let's see what we got here. So, does anybody have any announcements? Not that we have to have them, but I believe not. Nobody on this side. Okay. So we're going to get started with our meeting. So we have public comment on agenda items. Or we want to do roll call?
Work session first. And then we'll
Okay.
do the special meeting since that should be pretty quick, and I know we have a lot of different people.
Whoever's speaking, can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, I don't know if your mic's
Okay,
on.
my mic's on. We're going to
Okay.
start with the work session. So
Okay.
the first item that we have is an update on Project Mover, which is our e-bike micromobility initiative. And I'd like to introduce Drew Van Hengel from our Nelson Nygaard, our Project Mover team, to provide an update and brief the board and the public on the next steps.
Yeah,
Yeah. I know. I'm sure.
it's for the folks on Zoom.
Great. No, of course. Hi, I'm Drew Van Hengel, the senior principal at Nelson Nygaard, and I'm accompanied by my colleagues Alex from Shared Mobility Inc. and Bryn from Nelson Nygaard as well. We have just about a 15-minute update. We'll try to move through it quickly so that if you have questions, you can ask them. So the update includes on the next slide, Jamie, please, the overview of Project Mover for those of you for whom the project might be a little bit new, a bike share pilot performance report from the pilot, which ran in the village last late summer and fall, and some updates on our expansion planning. So after this slide, you'll see that this project was born in cooperation with y'all and other villages as a consistent, to meet a consistent request throughout planning processes that preceded the planning process for Project Mover, which was to introduce electric bikes into the village specifically here as our primary champion for Project Mover, which is a NYSERDA funded grant. But also in other villages, and we were lucky enough to win a multi-million-dollar award together from NYSERDA to originate a bike share program here in the village and expand it to two other work streams that I'll talk about downstream from this presentation, plus 4 other communities. So on the next slide, just an introduction to your Project Mover team. Nelson Nygaard is here represented, but also representing Shared Mobility Inc. with Alex, as they are the operator of the system. They work with Drop, who is the vendor providing the bicycles for the system, and CityFi, who provides the project management for all these different members of our team and administers the grant through in cooperation with InnoEnergy. Croton e-bikes is supporting the ownership program. This is the company formerly known as Pedigo Bikes up in Croton, and other community-based partners, namely Hudson Link, Neighbors Link, IFCA, and I always forget this, Open Door.
Open Door, yeah.
Thank you. So a big team that's working together over the last couple of years to get us to this point. As I mentioned, there are many elements of Project Mover. There are 6. It's the public e-bike share program, which you could be familiar with because it was here in the village last fall. E-bike ownership incentive program, which is a pathway to ownership for people who need support because of their income to be able to get their own e-bikes. An e-bike lending library, which is a community-based initiative to provide space for people who are entering into the bicycle community, and also to be a place where one could check in and out bikes that aren't in either of the 2 element programs above. Neighborhood Greenway Network, we've been working with the village. You might have seen those share the lane, share the road signs that are flashing yellow on many of your streets. Those are on the streets that were designated as bike boulevards to elevate the elevate the need for people to understand that bicycling is a legal movement on the road, and that when people are driving around and with bicycles, that especially where there are no bike lanes, that the lanes shall be shared. Educational programming, got a little update about that downstream, but really excited about that. And then the Electric Mobility Incubator, or EMI, is kind of the Village of Ossining leading the way for other villages to jump in and implement each of these work streams that we described above. And then finally, two additional work streams support all of the 6 core program elements. There are the community engagement and outreach, which have been informed in large part by our community-based organization partners in monitoring, measuring, and evaluating how well the systems are going. On the next slide, just a little bit of a deeper dive into bike share. The Project Mover objective is to launch a bike share program of up to 300 bikes in total in Ossining, Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, Croton-on-Hudson, and Dobbs Ferry. And I won't go down and go through the rest of the dot points at this time. I think you all were provided a copy for this meeting. So let's talk next about the ownership incentive program, which is going to be new. We have been doing a lot of research to understand the landscape of these incentive programs. There are statewide programs operating in Massachusetts and California. There's not a statewide program in New York yet, but there could be one. And the objective is to develop an affordable and equitable program to encourage personal e-bike ownership. What does that mean? People express their interest to get vouchers to complement the difference between what bikes cost and what they're able to pay. And there will be a variety of bikes offered through this program. They'll all be sold up in Croton at this point, but we hope to bring in more companies over time. So that will be, there'll be a schedule later, but we're very close to launching that program. The e-bike library, we're holding back a little bit, but as I mentioned before, the objective is to create a library programming that meets the unique needs of Ossining residents. Think a little bit about your library, your most excellent library, and how it serves a lot of community uses, and also as a place where you can get a variety of books. And so that is basically the best metaphor that we have for what an e-bike library will look like and be. And we're kind of waiting for a demand for that to grow, which we hope will be, the demand for that will come at about the same time that the multimodal transportation center will be, under construction and operating. So the timing's really great for that. Looking at the whole project schedule on the next page, we e-bike share is the docked bike share that we piloted here in the village. We are doing our expansion planning right now and plan to launch a few more stations, up to 5 more stations in the second quarter, early second quarter of this year. At the same time, we're working on site agreements with the villages of Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown, Croton-on-Hudson, the town of Ossining, and lagging a little bit behind is Dobbs Ferry. So all these villages will be having stations in all likelihood by the end of Q4 of this year, with potentially the exception of Dobbs Ferry. The EBOP, which is actually the EBIP, the incentive program for ownership. We're passing a milestone with NYSERDA, the funding agency, right now. And as soon as we pass that milestone in contracting, we'll be able to release the expression of interest. We're going to be working with our community-based partners to make clear the availability of this very simple entry into the ownership pathway. The voucher recipients will be selected at random for that program, hoping to launch that by the late fall, early winter next year. But I think we're going to be closer than that for the whole program, and launching the villages program again in Q2. Sorry for misstating that. And then the e-bike library, as we said, we haven't passed a go, no go from NYSERDA for that. And we're not pressing on that because we want to really build on the success of e-bike share and the e-bip-bop. So we'll go to the next slide, please, Jamie. Wanted to tell you a little bit about the pilot. It launched on August 26th. The shutdown for the season on December 9th. Really appreciate the partnership with staff from the Village of Ossining and getting the communications out about that in a timely way, so people who were coming to depend on the program could know ahead of time that the bikes were coming in and hibernating for the winter. There were 11 stations, there were 50 bikes, and there was a website. And the map on the right illustrates where the stations were. A little bit about how the fee structure. This is not in the right place, but in 2024, the pilot included a pay per ride structure that was very low, the lowest in the country. And that included a flat fare and unlocking a bike at less a low per minute rate. 2025, we've taken a look at the structure and fee schedule of multiple programs across the country and within the state of New York, because that's more aligned with how the Project Mover is. And we'll be using that similar pay per ride option. There will be monthly and annual membership options and discount program for users who meet the income requirements. So we'll be continuing with equity pricing and also a low price structure, low to moderate compared to other, low or at rate compared to other systems. And we're just working through the details of that pricing structure right now. And it'll be communicated, of course, in partnership with riders as we start looking towards the launch in the spring. The next slide, some trends. There were 1,459 trips made in total. That came out to 1,983 miles of travel. The average time of using, the total minutes traveled, 27,545 minutes. It's even hard to comprehend that number. The average miles per trip were 1.36 miles, so about 1.5. For people rating their ride as four stars or more, 94.32% of those. And the top 3 destinations were Nelson Park, Metro North Plaza, and Arcadian Shopping Center. 669 people took one or more trip. In other words, they were repeat users. We'll go to the next slide to talk about our lessons learned. Our operations team is familiar to many folks sitting around this table. We're really thrilled with the local drop vendors operating team. They're quickly responsive to requests, and they're able to maintain the bikes and the battery capacity well. They can do that remotely. If specifically the battery capacity piece, they can say, oh, their bikes are running low. Let's switch out the battery so users don't have the experience of being stranded. There's a high demand and potential station reinforcement that we need moving into the spring. Metro North is a very high ridership location. We're thrilled about that. Nelson Park and the Arcadian Shopping Center and Municipal Lot number 7. So those are our high ridership stations. We learned from the bikes, which we did a test of before we selected drop, that the hill's not a barrier. The bikes are great riding up the hill. In fact, the Metro North station was the second most used starting point for all trips. So that's, an indicator that people trust the bikes will get up the hill. I'm happy to report that we've gotten some, at least one testimonial about that connection from the station from Mike Risco's music school. And they say that their staff person said that they're frequently using the e-bike to travel from the train station. So that reliability is really, reliability and performance is really a great success story for us. We think there'll be more in the spring. The top 3 hubs each highlight different use cases. Nelson Park highlights the value of a central residential recreational location. It wasn't our intention that we thought people would ride the bikes to the Nelson Park, but we're finding that the start and ends are primarily at the same station. So we had some conversations internally about whether that was okay for the park, and decided yes, that it was. So we left that station there. Metro North highlights the integration of the system with the regional transit, and the Arcadian Shopping Center highlights the value of hubs and retail centers. Importantly, I think what we're finding with Arcadian is that people are riding to Arcadian. There are more arrivals at Arcadian than there are departures, which we don't know the stories of the people taking those rides, but we imagine it's something like this. Let's take a low-cost way to get to Arcadian, and leaving Arcadian with the bags that are associated with shopping for your food doesn't quite make as much sense. So they might be taking a different way to leave the Arcadian Shopping Center. We'll go to the next slide, please. Looking into this, the Q2 of this year, the planning for expansion in the village, we had a meeting with village staff a couple of weeks ago who informed our potential expansion stations, which are maroon on this right map. There were 9 stations, possible locations for stations identified. The feasibility has yet to be tested. 5 of those will move into the system in the spring. And the focus is on more neighborhoods, other public parks, connections to the future town of Austining station locations, and also connections closer to Croton, which will be a partner in the system pretty quick here. Our next steps are to update the site agreements and determine this, the site infrastructure needs with an in-person walking tour, and to identify a relaunch date. Thanks. We can finally go to the next one. Thanks, Jamie. And so what about the expansion into the other villages? SMI, Shared Mobility, Inc., who again is our operator. They're kind of coordinating all the moving parts here, completed data analysis, desktop research, and site visits to identify site candidates for each EMI, that is the other villages that are going to be entering into the system. They confirmed with NYSERDA that our process and our deliverables are appropriate. So that means we passed the go, no go to be able to really do this planning. The town of Ossining, Croton, Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown, and Dobbs Ferry all have expressed in writing their interest and participation moving forward with locating stations. And the next step will be to do the field visits to verify the station locations. I think that, and then we'll install some hubs and we'll figure out the precise dates, which will probably be rolling, if we're honest, for each of the villages because our staffing is limited. Just a very not so easy to read graphic, but just to help understand the range. We've got 300 bikes total. Half of the remaining bikes are either in LA or close to LA, getting ready to go through customs. So we're excited about that. We know where they are. The other half are still on their way. So as we get them, we'll be distributing, and as we pass the different milestones with each of the villages, we'll be distributing them at the moment that we're looking at having 215 to 270 wild out in the field at a time. That allows us to have some wiggle room for maintenance and rebalancing. And the town of Ossining will likely have the lowest number of bikes, and the village of Ossining will have the highest. That's probably the best way to summarize that graphic. We'll go to the next slide, please. The EBIP now in this slide, 25 total vouchers, as I described. We'll focus first on distributing them through our CBO partners. It'll be a $1,000 voucher that will be presented at the point of sale for income qualified residents. There are also, to bridge the gap between the voucher and the actual price of the bikes in the event that that difference cannot be paid by the person buying the bike, there'll be a microfinancing system. So the difference between what can be paid and what it costs after the voucher is going to be provided through an option with Springbank, and the minimum loan for that would be $500 to cover that gap. Residents will fill out an online interest form prior to full application. We'll be doing some, again, announcing that opportunity soon. Education about the application process is well underway, and the e-bike safety will be described at a demo day event, which I'll talk about in a minute. At the moment, as I mentioned, the voucher is only available for use at Croton e-bikes. And some were curious about how to monitor the bikes after they are owned by the recipients. There will be no GPS tracking, but we will have relationships with people to ask them to report their odometers so we can use their ridership as part of our measurement and evaluation tool. All right, we'll go to the next slide. Education, these graphics on the next slide should be familiar with you. We'll be expanding their application as we move forward in the implementation of the program to other villages. We'll go to the next slide, please. We're having a demo day. I pre-staged that a couple of slides ago. That will be on March 23rd. Our priority is for people to start getting visibility about the ownership pathway program and the e-bike options available through that, and also the process, review the program eligibility requirements through that, and program application materials. It's going to be at the Joseph Caputo Community Center, 12 to 3, supported by Hudson Link trained bicycle skills instructors who are our community partners. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, because we've been really, really happy for the commitment of Hudson Link to have some fellows trained through the League of American Bicyclists to be certified bicycle instructors. Quite a few fellows made it through that process and now are eligible to teach out in the field, develop their own teaching programs. We're supporting them in creating those programs specifically for Project Movers, which allows for the compensation through the grant. There will be a classroom setting and outside on bikes portion of that class. Our hope is to grow from the demo day a couple of classes right after that, like get signups during demo day for classes. And our hope is in the long run to host monthly classes. We've been talking with Neighbors Link and Open Door about communicating the opportunity to take these classes through their trusted communication channels, and also about working with Open Door to use their site. And we're negotiating that currently. Topics include things like how should your helmet fit, how should your bike look and feel before you get on it, and road tips specifically for riding your bike on the road. and also e-bike safety. Also, we're coordinating with Hudson Link LCIs to develop group rides, which I think is part of like our pathway towards increasing the bicycle culture here and in the other villages. All this will be on the website, and it's just growing over time. So we're really excited about that. Finally, our priorities moving forward are, here on this next slide, provide some key inputs for the NYSERDA approval process to get past those milestones that I talked about, sign updated site agreements for each of the village expansion in the village of Ossining, go through the station siting process and agreements with the other villages, get those bikes I talked about that are on their way, and contingent upon that and their successful check when they get here, determine a launch date for bike share and a launch date for the e-bike incentive program, and more immediately promoting the March 23rd demonstration day. I know.
Okay. It's like a speed course. Love it.
We
This is
got the
great.
assignment.
Well, it's like we've been waiting for this moment for a couple of years.
Mhm.
So, and I know you're one of the people that's been with us since day one, actually. So I
Yeah.
think it's great.
Thank you.
It's really good. I'm sure it makes you also super happy about that. Do we have questions? I'm sure we do. Some questions and comments. I'm going to start to my right over here with Dana White.
Do you have figures on like the total number of rides that were taken? And you had the most popular, but, and to that, are there locations that you think you might remove because they weren't used?
Trustee, thank you. Yeah, there were 1,459 total trips and 669 individual users within those trips. And we have de-identified information about each trip pair. So part of our expansion planning will be to consider whether fewer bikes should be at particular hubs or whether there is even an opportunity to remove, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Mhm.
I really need to get on a bike, but I'm afraid I'll fall off. So,
Come take our class.
really?
Yeah.
When is the class?
March 23rd, I think you said.
Oh,
doing
you'll be
demonstrations
doing
that's-
demonstrations?
No, but she said after that they're hoping to
April.
run a class right after
Yeah,
that.
we're hoping for April. I don't know
Oh,
Bryn,
you
if
are?
we have
Okay.
Yeah.
particular dates identified.
Yeah.
We
I'm
can take
old.
pedals off of bikes and help. We have a particular suspect in mind in this room for that, but we can, we
just
would like people to be able to have balance on bikes, but for people who have never ridden a bike, that would be a different.
Oh, I
course.
have, but I know e-bikes are not like your regular bike, right?
We can help with
I
that.
mean, in my household, we're actively discussing how we can reduce the number of cars and how we can use alternative electric transportation, and do we need all these cars? And so I mean, just think it's a great, and we'll probably go down a car and I'll just share one. I don't need one all the time, but then I'd also love to have an e-bike, but I just, I'm accident prone, I'm sorry. But I think it's great and I'm glad that people liked it. And I did hear, in terms of price, I had somebody comment to me that they thought it was expensive. But and I don't really know how to measure that vis-a-vis, you said it was actually one of the lowest costs. So I don't even know what that means exactly, but that was what they said. But I said, well, I think it's about as low price as we can make it. You know what I mean? So
I can probably respond to that unless Drew
Go
or
ahead.
Bern or Alex want to. We were really, really firm about that. And my understanding from the team, unless something has changed in the meanwhile, is that this is actually, in large part because it's so heavily subsidized through the NYSERDA program, probably the least expensive bike share in the state of New York.
yeah,
I think when we heard that very early on, it was because they put a $10 hold on the card to start. And then obviously if you're only on the bike for 10 minutes, it charges you $1 and then 12 cents a mile for that time. And then 2 business days later, you get your $10 back
Right,
effectively.
okay.
So that was something that we heard a couple times also, but then when people understood that that money would be returned to them if they didn't use the full duration, people were more comfortable.
Yeah.
thanks.
I just want to, I have an e-bike, so they're expensive, but they're expensive everywhere. It's like saying, gee, this car is expensive. It's expensive in relation to what? Like you got to compare it to something. These are not children's bikes that you buy at Walmart on sale. Bicycles are not cheap. And in COVID, I think they tripled actually in price. I'm not sure if they've come down a lot, but, decent bikes. And these are heavier bikes. If the market comes down, I'm sure these will come down, but I do think I'd be interested to know in the buying part, like, the lease part, where we land with those pricing. But the per unit prices are relatively low. And the beauty of it is that you don't have to worry about the bike. So it's also priced in a way that when you own a bike, you got to tune it up every year for, $220. And you got to the tire goes flat, you don't have any of those costs because it's on them. So it's a relative stance when people say, I always want to say, well, what did you pay for an e-bike somewhere else or whatever? I mean, I've seen them and some of them are expensive. This seems to be, I did take it once. It's scary when you first get on it. I do have to say that.
Yeah, we encourage people to come and take the class because.
Yeah, on like flat areas too, especially since it's so hilly here. So next time, if people talk about pricing, I would be really interested to hear what they're comparing.
Yeah.
Like, did they see it somewhere else for less? And if they did, what were they like? So that we have something to work with.
Right.
That would be helpful. Omar, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. First, is that your Brompton?
It is.
I also have a very similar bike. Mine is orange. It was my staple for many years in my beginning of my journey here in Ossining. So it's the same one, the same one. Yeah, so mine is orange. So I'm pro bike for sure, 1,000%. And I appreciate a lot of the data that is in this presentation in terms of usage and all those different things. Very, very helpful. I think the two things that come to mind for me are, number one, we are a dynamic village in change. And so as the downtown revitalization initiative projects take shape, as all of these different projects that we have apart from that start to take shape in the village, I'd be curious, from the road diet to other things, how those things impact the use of these bicycles. Not a question, but I think, just kind of putting together what I know is happening to what you presented, since it's not a static picture that we're playing in. And then secondarily is the one thing that I think would be helpful is as you start to get more information about how folks are using these bicycles, if we can use that in some way to the word that comes to mind is kind of educate, but it's like educate and promote and saying, hey, if you are going from the train station to this place, like here's the map of the charging stations. You should, if you something that gives people a use case, because as people are milling around and they see, oh, look, the bikes are here, and you kind of have to over time put together like, how am I using this and why? So if there were just like a quick start guide that were specific to Ossining, to say, here's how we most use them here in Ossining to get from the train station to Mike Risco's or blah, 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 or get to Arcadian or blah, blah, blah. So I think that would be really helpful. But I think this is awesome, and I would just love to see it come to fruition even more over time.
Thank you. Some great ideas, and we can definitely do some, we could develop with Jamie some media posts just describing our highest, use, or describing the use cases. That's a great idea. Thank you.
You have anything, Bob?
Just real quick, thank you. Great presentation. The total trips actually surprised me. I didn't think it'd be that high, but I really didn't. 1,500 trips. That's a lot of trips. And there's an unlocking fee, correct?
That's right. It's like $1.
$1, and then what's the minute fee?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. No, that was very enlightening, but Omar pretty much covered the gauntlet there, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your support and working us through the battery process.
So I have, I don't want to repeat what's been said. Thank you for the really great presentation. Zoomed through, I think, all of the key points that are of interest to us and to the public. I'm interested in the growth. I noticed it says that the other municipalities have expressed interest. I didn't see that that their boards have approved it. So exactly where are we with the other villages? And 1B of that's 1A, 1B, how does it work? I pick up a bike here, they all look the same in all the municipalities, so I pick up here, and I want to go to Croton and maybe take the train back or something. So once other communities have it, we can go across those communities, and that's the expansion. Just want to make sure I have that right. So can you
Yes, so,
tell me where we exactly are with our neighboring
yes. Meg.
municipalities?
I think I can. I might rely on Alex for a little bit more support here. So all of the villages and all the municipalities have submitted their expression of interest, which is a process that goes through at the highest level. In terms of actually moving from that to helping us identify what sites will be appropriate, I'd like Alex to let the mayor and trustees know where all the other villages are.
Absolutely. So for your understanding, with each of the municipalities, we've been working with them to do these in-person site visits to identify a list of sites that are potential locations for the hubs. Now, where we stand with them is that we have to execute a site agreement similar to what the village executed with Drop Mobility to initiate the pilot. So we're currently working on that process right now. And at this moment, all of the municipalities, except for the village of Dobbs Ferry, are in a good position to make it for the early spring launch. And then to the question B as well, it's going to be a regional system. So you, as you described, you can absolutely take a bike from Ossining into Croton and leave the bike in Croton. So it will be available in those communities where there are hubs.
Yeah, Alex, that's great. And what I might add is that Drop is monitoring the system at all times. So if for some reason all the bikes end up at the Croton train station, there's a van that balances them back to the places where that they originated from. So the next day, the people who, for whatever reason, only made one-way trips are accommodated. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we've had some requests of interest from non-NYSERDA villages. And we're working on figuring out a way to bring more villages into the regional system with no impact to the NYSERDA funding. So a different price structure for those villages that would bridge some gaps, honestly, in the regional system. So we think it's really an opportunity to talk more in particular with the village of Irvington. We're not quite there yet to how, but whether we can do that is clear.
Okay, and my last question. So I have an interest in the fact that I think Phelps, a lot of employees at Phelps live in Ossining and Regeneron. Those are both located in Tarrytown, actually, Sleepy Hollow and Tarrytown. That would be great for, like, the person in at Risco's Music who commutes in. He has a lot of people commuting to train, and then now they have an easy way to get to work on time. This would also help people who are visiting, grandparents, whatever. I think it's super helpful. So the Aqueduct system, the Aqueduct Trail, I think these bikes are allowed.
Mhm.
So I do get a lot, I don't know if it's a lot. I never know what a lot is. I get questions about, the roads are already so unsafe, they're small, they're hilly. The answer is, yeah, that's what river towns look like. We actually can't flatten any of these roads out. They are what they are. We did talk in the beginning when we approved this about having these avenues and lanes. I see the signs. Those signs don't do a heck of a lot for me. I actually didn't even associate that it was for this project, to be honest with you. So I really do want people to still work on some sort of, where possible, to have lanes or avenues, because when the board approved this project, that was supposed to be one of the first things to get done. And now it's pushed to being later on in the game, which is fine, We're a pilot, we're an incubator. The whole point of incubators is like you live and learn. You predict things and you make changes. That's fine. That's cool. But it would be great. The Aqueduct Trail goes through all of the river towns, actually. So the more people are educated about that, you can get to Irvington, actually. It goes through the middle of their community, right by the pizza parlor there, right by the school. So you could actually use that. So you're not on Route 9, actually, which is so safe. So education also about creating the avenues, but also educating which might be the best, and then lining them correctly, which will come in later on. I'm hoping that the staff is thinking about that too, because I can't flatten a river town and make it, White Plains. It's just not going to happen.
I'd like to address a couple of those for the benefit of
Please.
the community. Thanks. Firstly, yes, the village of Sleepy Hollow was not actually on board when we first applied for this funding, and we were able to get a grant agreement change with NYSERDA in order to incorporate the village of Sleepy Hollow, so that and we're really grateful that all the initial applicants were supportive of that, because it makes a lot of sense. Secondly, to the connection of the major employers, Phillips and Regeneron, absolutely very interested in working with them for siting on their properties in all likelihood, and also talking about downstream sponsorship opportunities, because after this grant, we want to make sure we've developed a sustainable program that works after the NYSERDA grant is over. And as someone like who was born and who was with his father, her father, when he died at Phelps Hospital, that's a really key place that I traveled from to buy the aqueduct. So we're really working with all the villages on the value of the aqueduct, thinking about, having ridden on it myself today, thinking about what happens when there's so much demand that there will be some community protests around, wow, I didn't expect to see bikes on the aqueduct. So really forecasting in the future when there can be a balanced usage of the e-bikes and the people walking. So really excited to think about that comprehensively, and
Good.
appreciate your inquiry. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that'll be great. Okay, I think that's that. Nice seeing you again. I only see you on Zoom once in a while, so always nice to see you in person. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
Thank you, Drew, and all the Project Mover team. in
Thank
the
you,
virtual
folks.
world.
You're all welcome to stay for the rest of the exciting work session. I always invite everybody to stay. Mike, stop laughing. You're always welcome to stay and hear the other topics. Next.
Yes, next. So since 2023, village staff and the mayor and the board have been discussing the length of service award program, also known as LOSAP, with representatives of the Ossining Fire Department. This is a program that will provide benefits based on length of service to our volunteer firefighters, who we are very committed to supporting, obviously. It does require in order to go ahead with this, it does need to be approved via referendum, and that referendum is scheduled to be on, we'd like it to be on the November ballot. But there's an update that Assistant Village Manager Maddie Zahach will provide, and take you through where we've been, where we are, and what we need to do to make sure that we get this on the ballot.
Great. I think that he still, Trustee Fritchie is a longtime member of the fire department. I think he left because he has recused himself, because he may or may not, but he may benefit from this program, even though usually we are grateful for his deep knowledge of how fire departments work and all that. In this case, he's recused himself from, I think, rightfully. So we still have 3 of us here. So excited to hear the update.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. I know our treasurer, Dale Brennan, is also on to support me in this conversation in case I had a roadblock. So thank you very much, Dale. So this is a very exciting topic. I don't know that this will be a super exciting update, but I'll do my very best. As the manager mentioned, back in 2023, Mike Aurora, representing the OFD LOSAP committee, came before this board in this very room and did a very, very comprehensive presentation on LOSAP, which again is a length of service award program. To put it roundly, it's very similar to like a pension for volunteer firefighters. So this is something that many of the volunteer fire departments in Westchester County and throughout New York State have been in for several decades. This is something that is prescribed under New York State law as being something that communities with volunteer fire departments are entitled to enact, but it does need to be by referendum, as Karen mentioned. So when we went through the presentation, I believe it was in September, the board needed some time to put this together because understandably, this is a forever commitment. This is a long-term commitment because we want to make sure that we're doing it smartly. It integrates biometrics, which is not something that's done in a lot of communities. So there are a lot of things that we really needed to explore further, and we took most of 2024 to do that. So Mr. Aurora, along with Mr. Donnie Farrell and then Chief Scarduzio, met with me, with the mayor, with Karen, met with Dale quite a few times to sort of make sure that all of the village's questions could be adequately answered based on, the preliminary information and questions that we heard from you all. Some of the things that came up that we weren't expecting. Right now, we have 3 chiefs, for those who don't know. And the chiefs are they're elected chiefs by the Austin Fire Department, and each one is in place for a total of 6 years. One is second chief, one is first chief, and then chief engineer. And during that time, they receive a stipend from the village of Austin. Something that came up that we were not anticipating is that there are some opinions through New York State Department of Labor that say an all-volunteer fire department is what's needed for LoSAP, and those stipends disqualify chiefs from being considered volunteers in that regard. So it's an opinion. I don't know that there's anything hard and fast from Fair Labor Standards, but that's something that we're looking to address. The chiefs are all, to my knowledge, I think, understand that that's something that we still need to look at. If in fact we need to reduce it or eliminate it completely, there's a way we can account for that by increasing the points value that they will get. So we're willing to sort of compromise where we can to cover that loss if in fact there is one. The presentation that came from the committee, which we uploaded into the agenda if anybody wants to take a look, the plan that the committee, who I think worked for several years to put something together. It's a lot of hard work from all 9 companies. Oh, Jamie, you're very sweet. There's like a million slides in there. If you go all the way to the very, 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 very end, the one that the committee recommended was a defined benefit plan, $20 per member per month, a 40-year max contribution, and an entitlement age of 65 years. So when we discussed this last year, the board generally was supportive once we did some projections based on the census numbers that we've gotten from the fire department, and then adding a conservative 20% cushion, that the board was comfortable with those elements of the plan as put forth by the committee. But as I put in the memo, there's a couple things still that we need to sort of hash out. And I'm looking for answers on most of these tonight or within the week. I didn't realize that we're going to be missing a trustee tonight. So the first one is the look back period. So the look back period is specific to members who are not brand new. Is this the one? Yeah, okay. There were some estimates about how many members would qualify for the look back. And basically it says if you qualify in year 1 and you have this many years of service, we'll look back 5 years and also give you credit for those years. So you basically get a leg up on going forward into that 20. When we spoke about it in the fall, the board was comfortable with the $20, even though I think originally we had started at 10 or 15, but the look back was not something that the board was interested in doing. We have since researched, most people do some form of a look back, but it doesn't need to be 5 years. It could be 2 years, it could be 3 years, or it could be 5. So just wondering if the board has any desire to revisit that. We can get it quoted through Penflex at all of the levels. Penflex is the vendor who's going to be doing this analysis for us. So we don't have to make that decision now. We just have to ask Penflex, here's what we'd like you to look at. And we don't have to make the decision quite yet. The second, as I mentioned prior, is the chief's annual stipend, which we're working on that element as well. We also have 2 paid part-time fire dispatcher positions that are paid by the village. We don't foresee a conflict there since that's an hourly rate on a paycheck, and those hours wouldn't count towards LoSAP. So that I think we've cleared. It's really just the chief issue. The third one is sort of interesting. It didn't come up, I don't think, in any of our conversations, a beneficiary benefit. So if, for example, God forbid, somebody starts in the fire department at age 25, they do all 40 years, they make it to 65, that's the year they can start collecting, and 2 years later they pass away. Well, they were obviously anticipating getting it for much longer than only 2 years. And wouldn't it be nice if that investment could go to somebody similar to a pension? You have a beneficiary. It's not something we discussed. It's completely within the village's control, whether you want to have a beneficiary program or not. And then if you want to have one, what are the terms? So you can do up to 10 years of survivor coverage, and you can determine under what conditions the survivor can get the coverage. So that's something that we would also need to flesh out. And then finally, this is something that we could sort of work on in spring going into summer. This is less important for the immediate, but the recalibration of points values. So Jamie, if you can actually put that back up, that was actually sort of helpful. There are a couple slides in about the middle of the slide deck that talk about what the committee would like to see for each of the various components. New York State has put together a sample plan telling us what the maximum allowed in all of the categories are. If you go, you'll know it when you see it. A little bit more up, please. I know there's a lag. But in any event, the committee put forth their recommendations for what they think should be the max in each category. So for example, I believe out of the officers category, so just for being an elected officer in the fire department, if you do nothing else, you get this many points just for being an elected officer. So they had made some determinations that we might want to take a look at, primarily the one of chief. If we're taking away the stipend, they asked for 20, we could make it 25. 25 is the max. So that's something to consider. Jamie, this is perfect. If you go up just like one or two more. Perfect. Yep, you're there. So you can get up to 25 points for fire responses. You need 50 to make the year. So it's binary. You either get credit in a year towards your pension or you do not. You have to hit 50 to get credit in that year. So you could get 10 years in a row and then you move to a different state and you get none and then you decide to move back and then you can continue into the program. So that is one that we would suggest that the board, in partnership with the treasurer's office and the manager's office, take a look at. Another is the LoSAP administrator. So in speaking with Mr. Aurora, I've come to understand this a little bit more. Basically, it's a mandatory component of the program that within each company and then within the department, there'd be a LoSAP administrator at each level. And it's common for there to be a set number of points associated with that, similar to the elected officers. This is going to be a feel our way through kind of thing. We can talk to other communities, which we have, about what their process has been. How does the department and the company liaise with the finance office, with the treasurer's office, and how much work is on whose plate to sort of determine if 15 points per year is the appropriate number for that. So that's sort of a work in progress. And then finally, the category miscellaneous activities. We know that we have the best fire department in New York State. There's no question about it. And we want everyone else to know that too. So we participate in a lot of parades. Also, it's a huge community benefit that, firefighters are available at wakes, funerals. They fuel up the trucks every Sunday, I think. So to make sure that that's done consistently, as well as attendance at committee meetings, all kinds of e-learning. So all of these things are important. The state allows you to get up to 15 points in a year, 1 point per event. So if you went to 15 parades, for example, you could get 15 points in that category. I know from speaking with the board in our preliminary conversations that the focus of implementing LoSAP is twofold. One is to reward community members who are giving of themselves, their time, their family's time to the community for these activities, but also for recruitment and retention. And those are two really important elements, but so is education. So we really want to make sure that the firematic activities are prioritized. Miscellaneous activities might be a category where the board might want to either have a tighter list of activities that could apply, or consider changing the points value assigned. So other than that, once I hear what the board sort of has to say about those 4 categories, most specifically the look back period, that's really the important element at this time, we can go into the next steps. We're pretty much ready to go. The board had approved in the 2025 capital plan the hardware so that we could get a jump on that this winter, which we got all the quotes. We're ready to issue a purchase order, I believe, as of today. And so that should be off to the races. We spoke with the folks at PenFlex this week. They are going to update the census based on the outcome of this meeting. So based on the look back scenarios that the board might like to see. And after that, they're going to write the resolutions for us and we're going to really dig into the process of the points. So that's really where we stand today. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. We have to have the draft referendum to the Board of Elections by July 30th. We have to let them know by the end of the month of March that we will have one, which is easy to do. But the actual text of it is something we're going to have to carve through with PenFlex over the next 4 months. So that's where we're at. Happy to answer any questions that I can.
Okay, thank you. Before we get started, I just want to put some context. It sometimes feels, because you guys work on this stuff all the time, the public may only be hearing about it the first time. So I just want a little context. Number one, we have one of the largest, if not the largest, volunteer fire department, and it is a volunteer fire department. There are some paid. That is a different category altogether. That is not what we have. Because it's so large, the board is concerned and was concerned from day one that while I've always said that I want to get to a yes on this, there's a concern because once we agree to do this, it is into perpetuity. This is not a one-time shot. This is not, let's see how it works for 3 years and then we undo it. It's not like that at all. We are committing future mayors and boards forever to add this into their budget. We've estimated, I'm just going to do ballparks because the numbers are there. Dale is available. There was a lot of work about the costs. There's the hard costs. There is the vendors telling you how much things cost, which, I always add a weight to that because, it's in their self-interest. And then there's all the other costs that we have experienced with other projects. So, and Dale, you could tell me, but my ballpark figure for where we landed was around $350,000 to $450,000 a year. And I think Dale did put in percentage of like increases, cost of living. We went through a bunch of those kind of gyration. Am I in the ballpark? I don't need the exact number. This is really, it's a work session, so it's really staff and board. Is that about?
Yes. Yep, you're definitely in the ballpark.
So-
Starting at the $10, it was about 377, 974. With all in any associated costs we could think of. At the $20 multiplier, and of course you have the 15 in the middle, it was 527,908.
How much?
527,908.
So I'm actually off. It's really
So,
550.
But
Okay.
that's also included the buyback, which I think was
Yeah, it's all
part.
the way. It's the
Yeah.
It's the one with the sprinkles and not the plain generic.
Yes.
So just so we know, this is a conversation for the board because we are first step. Do we want to go forward with this? We can say no and it stops. Do we want to go forward with some sort of a plan? Last time we met, there was like A, B, and C plan. We sort of went for like the B. Not the least expensive, but not the most, because we felt, really, for me, I think always a hesitation to commit future boards forever. Look, on our budget, it's not the most expensive thing, but these things don't get cheaper. They get more and more and more expensive. We all know that. And we all know whatever number we're discussing today will be 30% more by the time we get done with it, because every single thing that we have done since we've all sat in these chairs ends up 30% more than anybody tells us it's going to be. Even though Dale is really known to be amazingly conservative. I won't even discuss the water plant because that's like more than 30% increase. But it's the reality. And we sitting here have an obligation to our volunteers who are members of our community. And we also have an obligation to be truthful and honest with the people who are going to vote on this, because we are not voting on moving it forward or not at the final stage, only at this stage. We're going to recommend a plan that we believe is in the best interest of everyone concerned. And that includes our volunteers, our community members, our businesses, everybody that's involved in this, and forever future boards. Can they change at some point legally? Probably, I think, Mike, but it's almost impossible. Let's be honest, that's not going to happen. And if we were like, you said that most places in the state are doing, I don't think it's most. I think it might be in Westchester. Yeah, it's not actually. I just want people to understand that it's not that way in much of New York State, but it is in Westchester County. I just want to be accurate because it's not fair to the public. Because as accurate as I'm going to be, you all know that I'm a supporter of this, but I want people to understand the pros and cons. Because after looking at the pros and cons, I'm still very excited about it. But I do think that we don't need to build a Cadillac. I like Priuses better, and I think that we have to be fair to our community. We have other volunteer organizations. My prediction is right behind this will be even more, and that's something the boards always have to look at. So we have to think in terms of what the domino effect of everything is. I like the program because I think it's a fair program. Not all chiefs get stipends. Not all chiefs get the same stuff that our chiefs do. As I learned in this process, we're a little bit more generous in many ways and probably less generous in others. And nobody in the public, I think, understands how all these different houses work and all of that. But what I do want to make very clear to the board is once this moves into the form of a pension plan, I am unbelievably uncomfortable that each house manages all this stuff. Mike, you know, I've had this conversation about this. It's going to have to be managed by our finance department. It's going to have to, we're going to have hours, which is, I asked that it be added also to the budget. There's going to be people that have to manage this because a firefighter goes out to fire, forgets the points. He shouldn't be able to do that because there's a laptop, but the laptop was burnt in the accident, whatever. There's going to be 100 stories. It's human beings running towards fires. Everything is not going to go smoothly. It never does. We just have to be prepared for that. So then you got an HR issue. You got somebody coming in a year later that says, oh, I did X, I'm supposed to get 5 points, but I only got 3. And that'll be hours of work on the HR department over 2 or 3 points. Just the reality of life. That's the way it's going to go. So HR is going to have to be involved in it. We got a budget for that. And so will future boards. So will the legal department, because I've no question in my mind that out of, what is it? It's like 180 people qualify out of the 450, 160? It started higher and then you guys figured out that it was even fewer.
It started higher and it sort of swung down, but again, we put a pretty generous buffer on there just
Right.
to make sure we were safe.
So just
I
give
think
me a number.
112 was the number
112?
that we
Okay,
added the buffer
112.
onto, yeah.
So 112, you know the 2 out of 112 are not gonna object to something. And then our lawyers will be busy for another 100 hours figuring out, you know, where something went wrong. We'll get sued for some benefits. This happens with employees. This is normal stuff because it's no longer a volunteer. And yet, I'm very supportive of it because to me, it's the cost of doing business. You have volunteer fire departments, and I've said this publicly. I go to these NICOM conferences, and once you move into northern New York, there are no fire departments left. There is like no volunteers left. You know, you got to travel 100 miles to find the local, you know, fire department. So you hope that your house doesn't burn down in an hour, that it stays around for them to save whatever they have to save. So I do believe this is a good retention tool. And I mean, I think if you're going to volunteer, this is not going to make you want to volunteer, but if you volunteer and you feel appreciated, you serve the community in a better way. I don't know, honestly, if it's an acquisition, but we'll learn. We'll see. The other thing you didn't mention, and I'm doing this, you know what I'm doing. I'm doing this for the public record. Somebody's going to say, I don't understand it. I'm going to go, okay, at 8:30 on Wednesday in February, we discussed this. Go look at the video. So I'm sorry if I'm boring some of you. It's not because I like to talk. It's because I'm doing this for public record. There was also a piece that once we agree to something, we can't undo certain things. So the board has to we have to point those things out, right? So if you could just reiterate
Sure.
what
I
those
can
are.
elaborate on that too. So this is created by referendum. If at any point in the future any board wanted to dismantle it, it would also need to be done by referendum. But further, every change that you make going forward would also have to be done by referendum. So several of our neighboring communities last year, I think, had referendums because, again, they've been in this pipeline for a long time. They started off maybe at $20 per member per month. Now they've gone to 30, and I think New York State said they could go to 40. So if you want to change that, or if you want to change the points distribution, that all has to go before the public, I believe. Does the points have to or no?
If you
Yeah.
just go,
Sorry.
no, it's a work
I was
session.
trying
It's
to
cool.
let you stay in your seat.
Yeah. Oh, he likes to speak. I'm like, come on. It's on. Is the green light on?
It's on. Hello.
There you go.
Sorry. So the way it was explained through Penflex to me is that any revenue impact change, so point system possibly not, but anything that's going to change the dollar amount, the payout amount, the years, would have to go back to another referendum, up,
Good.
down, or any.
Okay. So
The $20, $30, $40 you're talking about.
Can you speak into? the
Explain that,
microphone?
that's paid,
So all of
who's
this is
paying that to whom?
all of this is done by an actuary. So the difference between a defined contribution and defined benefit
So
plan.
the firefighter pays.
No, no.
We're
no,
paying.
the village pays, our board has to decide, which we did last time we discussed this. Dale presented 3 levels of payment. The least was $10, which we didn't go with. I think the board was leaning into $20, but we could also do more, 30, and she did different scenarios. This is direct money from our budget to pay these individuals as part of a benefit plan.
Okay, so this
They're
is
not
the
paying
money, this is where
anything.
the money comes from to pay.
This is where it adds up to
benefits.
500. This is part of the big chunk of how it adds up to 500,000 per year.
And then
in
it gets
cost.
invested into a fund, and again,
York
just like a
State,
pension. You know, there's a wealth advisor involved. I mean, there's all sorts of different levels above the village to keep eyes on this.
Right.
Our responsibility is really just to make sure the integrity of the data that we're giving to the actuary.
So just think about it. If you're in a volunteer organization, the hundreds that we have, they don't get pension plans. You volunteer, you do your thing, you go home. This is a volunteer organization that will be getting benefits upon retirement after X number of years. So it's not right away, X number of years. So you're now putting on volunteers who will end up getting a pension plan from the village of Ossining. I think I got that
So
right.
we have to decide now on the how far to go back.
There are
Correct.
3 things she asked
Right.
for. Survivor benefits, I'm not doing in the right order. One is the look back, 5
Look
years.
back.
It could be less, it could be last time I was 5 years, but I guess now it's like, it could be a year or 2 years. I think we leaned into, as Maddie said, we're not interested in that as the board. We could change our mind, but we were not interested in that. We're only interested in now going forward. Survivor, which has come up, meaning as she described, whether we want to do that. And the third thing is whether we want to recalibrate the points, right?
In what way?
Well, there's all these different points. So we
Right.
might say the committee, and there's a committee here.
Oh.
The committee had recommended, it's in the presentation, I'm going to make up a number, a total of 15 points, right? For stuff that comes up. So the board can say, I'm not interested in giving 2 points for people who go to funerals and a point for people who go to parades. I don't think that's what we want to do points. So we'll recalibrate from 15 to, let's say, 12. I'm only using that as an example. So I know where I'm leaning on this. I usually don't go first, but those, I think, were the 3 things in this meeting that you said, can we do that? And then we can discuss how the board feels overall.
Most urgently is the look back, because for the actuary to start their work, they need an updated census from the fire department, but they also need to know what different scenarios of look backs you're going to look
Right.
at. If the answer is none, then that's easy. If the answer is, well, we're thinking maybe 2, but show us 5 so we can compare 2 and 5, they can do that as well.
Yeah, they just, so Dana, just saying, the reason this has been so complex isn't because in theory it's complex, it's that they've never done this before, right? So now they got to say, who qualifies for this? We got 450, but who really, and then they have to look at attendance. I mean, they've spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours because they don't really document all this stuff. They document some things, every house documents it differently. It's actually been a great, in a sense, cleanup of like them knowing actually for the first time, I think in years, where each house and what's going on and who's who and what's what. So it's already been, as far as I can tell, like a good thing, regardless of any of this. So that was, I wanted to put some context and explanation for people because I don't think most people understand the infrastructure of fire departments. I certainly never did, and I'm still learning every day. So, okay, I'm throwing it over here to my right. Okay.
Oh, I just want to say, I'm not against a look back, but maybe not 5 years,
Okay.
maybe less.
Out of those things. Yeah. Sir? Oh, did you have a question?
I just wanted
A comment?
So, as you pointed out there.
No, it's on.
Turned it off so you didn't get an echo. As you mentioned just a minute ago about the cleanup, this has helped us clean up our accountability and our roster.
Yeah.
Tremendously. To everybody's point, when we first started out and I first gave the presentation, we were up in the 180 numbers. And now as we've all met and learned more, we've been able to trim that down to our last meeting of about 112. We also have 2 different categories of numbers to look at. The 112 may be what we're looking at moving forward. But in addition to learning that we don't have to do the full 5-year look back, the 5-year look back based on some numbers is significantly lower than that. It's probably around 80, and that's with a 20% cap, a buffer on top, based on actual data that we have in our reporting system and stuff.
You mean 80 firefighters who would
For the look back
qualify for
period.
the look back?
And
Any
No,
level of.
for any look back,
Oh.
1, 2, 3, we have.
They
data.
had to have already been doing it for a while.
I have the data, again, just firematically, we haven't done everything yet. We still have to look at who would have made it based on rank and the whole point system, but in 2024, you're looking at 57 members, 2023, 48, and 2022, 45. So as we've been talking about this, as you see, the numbers are already going up because I'm trying to keep the morale. This is coming. Let's, get out there. But several things also, I believe, and Dale is on, I believe of the numbers we're talking about, based on the higher number with the full 5-year look back, that's 110,000 maybe of that. And after 10 years, that drops off. So if we reduce the look back to actual numbers to try to trim that to more truer numbers, I feel it's going to significantly go down at the 5 years. And then if we look at, say, 3 years, the key component to that is we can tell every firefighter that they're eligible for 5-year look back. They have to qualify year 1 to get their look back. So if you're looking at actual numbers on who qualifies, the data is right there that you could tell 500 people they're eligible. It doesn't, based on the numbers, it doesn't support who's gonna, so we don't want to over budget as well. So I just wanted to give a little bit more insight on the look back. If it's not the 5, whatever we could do would be great. And the committee on our last meeting, the LoSEP committee, is actually doing exactly what you're doing. We're rehashing the points to make sure, with more knowledge that we have now, that we maybe readjust some things with the chiefs possibly losing their stipends, bringing their points back up, looking at the miscellaneous categories. And then the last thing about the LoSEP administrator, the role would be designed to help eliminate the risk, not to really oversee the dollars, but more of posting true numbers every month at every meeting and making sure people aren't finding out 3 months later that they did miss that 2 points 3 months ago.
Yeah, no, I think
No.
that's well understood. My comment was more that there are going to be added hours to legal and added hours to admin in Dale's department and added hours HR.
Correct.
Yeah,
And I do want to thank everyone. This has been an amazing time.
no, it's
No,
been
this is,
very
we're all
educational.
learning together. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Sir.
To start, let me start by giving my understanding of the look back, and then I'm going to ask some granular questions. So here's the deal. We have a decision in the past. We've decided not to look at 5, but we have a decision to make to say, of the firefighters that are around that would have qualified for LoSAP in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, how many of them do? And then of that number, then we would cut a check or credit them that amount. Not cut a check, but we would credit them that amount.
Mhm.
And that would kind of give them a head start moving forward. And so it's anywhere from 1 to 5 years of the 40. You have to hit 40 years, right? Is that right?
You can collect for up to 40 years. So we talked about this also. What if someone wanted to join the fire department at age 18? All right, awesome. But now you're done at 58. You can't collect till you're 65. So did we want to expand the 40 years where you can be part of the system? And we decided that that was not really worth doing.
Is that your question?
Correct. And I think where you're going also, just to fully understand the payout, you vest at 5 years. So once you hit 5 years and you're at age 65, you begin getting paid. But it's not the full amount. If we go with the $20, you're getting $100 a month because it's $20 a year for each year that you qualify. So to an earlier topic about you volunteer for a year, you make your points, you leave, you come back for 2 years. Usually there's time restraints. Like if you miss 2 years and you haven't vested yet, you're starting all over again. That's everything that has to be written into this when we work with PenFlex. Once you vest after 5 years, it's like tenure. Once you vest, you could leave for 4 years, come back to another year, and that year goes to year 6. So
And it's after 5 that it vests?
5 is vesting, which is why looking at the 5-year look back,
At the end of 5 years.
possible, correct, yeah, at the end of 5 years, possibly going with a 2 or 3.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. So that is helpful. Thank you. Thank you. So, no, it's helpful. That's helpful. So that it's up to, and so once it vests, right? What's the difference between 5 years of service and 40 years of service?
For every year, once you hit age 65 and you start collecting, for every year that you hit, no matter when you started, that's $20 a year that you get on a monthly basis. So if you turn 65 and over the course of your career with the fire department, you've done 10 years, you get 10 times $20 every month. Am I right?
$200
No.
a month. So it's
Why
$200.
don't you stand there, please?
So it's $200 a month.
Correct. So in the scheme of things, you're 18, you join, you put in 40 uninterrupted years. You're 58, you have to wait till 65 and you'll get $800 a month. Most people will not see that. In reality, people will volunteer, they'll have kids, they'll have family, they'll go get a career, come back, you know, that's the business of volunteering. So you'll vest, you'll leave, you'll come back. Most people are seeing 20, 30 years. So you're seeing anywhere from 400 to 600 at the $20 with 40 years. So the 40 years we're talking about, so you could cap it at 30. So then the cap
Do
is
we
at
currently have in this version that we're talking about that 40 years is the cap?
yes.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
and the reason why that's an important number is if you get a 20-year-old that starts volunteering and you cap it at 30, now they're 50, kind of want to keep the incentive for them to continue volunteering until 65. You know, there's other roles, driving and stuff like that, or still going in. So that's kind of where the plan, it has a lot of variables, but it seems to all funnel together properly.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
I'll stay here.
That is helpful. Yeah. So my current feelings on the matter are that just speaking for myself, I would be open to a 3-year look back with folks having to qualify in the current year in order to qualify, in order to be open for the 3-year look back. The reason is, and my rationale basically tracks, but the reason is if you look back in the last 3 years, really in the last 5 years, a lot for me is coming up for COVID, and a lot of what our first responders did during COVID, but we're not really having 5 years in the conversation. 3 years to me is more appropriate, just kind of financially for us looking at the numbers. A question though for me is, no, okay, no, I answered my own question. Because you don't have to, we're assuming that once you hit your what your no, not your vest, but once let's say you got your 50 points this year, so now you qualify for the 3-year look back. The 3-year look back, it's like you get the 50 points for the 3-year. So you don't have to like check the record. It's like how many parades did you go to in 2003, in 2023, or whatever.
You want to help?
Yes. That's what this process is now, that we've been spending the hours going through all of our records. We can't just blindly say the last 3 years, these people would have made it. We're checking all of our records, sign-in sheets, reporting systems and stuff, and coming up with the best of our knowledge on those members based on our data,
Yeah.
who would qualify, and we know who wouldn't. It's kind of easier sometimes to know who wouldn't, So yes, once we submit that and the plan gets voted on, those names are eligible if they hit year 1, but we've already done the research work that you've said.
Say it differently.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's say 50 people hit in year 1.
Yeah.
Those are the only people who on any planet would be eligible for a look back. So then we look at only those 50 people and say, what'd you do in 25? What'd you do in 24? What'd you do in 23? Well, maybe you hit in 26, but you didn't hit in 25 or 24, but you did in 23, now you're eligible for 1 year of look back. Okay, so it's still based on what you actually did during the look back period, but only people who hit in year 1 are eligible to look back at all.
Correct. That's a great point. So if you enacted 3 years and you approve 3 years and it gets voted on and it passes 3 years, that's saying, to Maddie's point, of the 50 people who may make it, they not all may get all 3 years based on their records. Some may get 1 year, some may get 2 years, some may get 3 years, but they can get up to 3 years based on the vote that we put forward.
That's
So-
a very helpful
Yes,
clarification.
and that's why this is great right here.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. We're gonna keep working those quads, Mike. You're gonna keep in.
Omar, can you turn on your microphone? Sorry.
He's got it on.
The battery's on.
Yeah, take my.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, Bob. It just needs to be buttoned.
So that only further reinforces my support for a 3-year look back as opposed to certainly 5 is the administrative burden in having to prove all of that. But and that's where I currently stand. I'm currently at 3 years, open to hearing how other folks feel. That's where I am. I'm at currently at 3 years.
So tell me where you, oh, I'm sorry, let me just say this. If you could tell me where you are about the other 2 ideas. Now, we
Sure.
don't have to always do it, but what Maddie had asked for, survivor, yes, no. Recalibration, what's your point of view on that?
Survivor, I'm a yes. I would look at what the standard is for number of years, and I'd go for average. I don't think we need to go lifetime if lifetime is not the standard, or and disproportionately short amount of time. But
The standard is 10.
so I would do 10. I'm in favor of 10, and then
The last one is recalibration of the points.
oh, can you explain? Because I understand the concept, but I don't understand the details.
That I don't really need a firm thumbs up or thumbs down tonight. That's going to be a process that the manager, the treasurer, myself, Mr. Aurora, his team, we're going to have to kind of shape that over the coming weeks. That's obviously going to be a component of the resolution, but that's not something I would ask the board to give me feedback on tonight specifically, just the idea that that's an element that we still need to look at. What we would do is come back to a later work session after we all have met and said, here's what the committee initially recommended. Here's what we're recommending now.
Okay.
Great, you will get no feedback from me there.
Okay, I thank you. So I think we're okay with that. We're also speaking a little bit more because Pat is out of town, but he does look at the recording, so he will be hearing, and he'll ask any questions that he has. So let me do me, and I've already said enough. I'm okay with a look back from 2 to 3 years, so not more than that. I'm not in favor of a survivor, but I could be convinced otherwise. The recalibration I would leave to the committee, and I go to some of the meetings because it's like a menu of like A, B, C, D, E on one side, and you choose this, but if you choose this lever, then you have to not do that. So let me give you a statement from me with a vote of 1. I am interested in recalibrating about firefighting. And education, which I know is another issue that you're all facing with what's coming down the pike with the increase in hours of all of this education, which I'm not a big proponent of. And it's a fight that you guys are in the middle of, meaning the fire departments, and we've been involved in that. The parades, the social aspect, I think all volunteer organization, the social aspect of volunteerism is actually a big deal for all volunteer groups, environments, anti-Semitism, immigration. The part of the social aspect is important to people. People volunteer a lot for that. So I'm not against it, but I would give it the absolute least amount of points and give the most to the other things. I don't know how I feel about the administrative person, whatever, this is details that I think we could sit here for an hour deciding whether it should be 1 point or 3 points, and the total waste of our expertise, of which there's 0 on that level. So I leave that to the committee to come back with recommendation. I will reiterate to the public that in my personal opinion, it isn't just, there are 3 elements that have to be taken into consideration. anchoring this into perpetuity for future boards that will not have a voice in it. And that's a very, very serious thing of adding this to our budgets. Secondly, that the costs are not just the obvious ones. It is all the staff time that we have, the legal time, computers that will, all these like laptops that they're gonna have now to sign in, and because they're not using paper and index cards anymore. It's all done digitally. Those things have a life of about 3 years, every 3 years, and everybody's going, oh no, they last 5 years. No, they don't. And their hands, they're fighting a fire, they're dealing with this, their hands have oil on them. And I mean, they're gonna be breaking these things like crazy. And if you change one, you have to change all of them. So there are these expenses beyond, and Dale has done as much as she could to get information on that. But those are real expenses. So we just have to, we have fiduciary responsibilities here. I am a big supporter of this. I don't think we have to be the cheapest, but like the deputy mayor, I also think that because we are so big, we have to be reasonable to community that already has huge expenses that they have to deal with. So, on one hand, and on the other hand, 30,000 people living on 3.2 square miles need a lot of fire department folks to save their lives and their homes and everything else. So let's keep perspective. The referendum will be done in the election. We all know that you got to get people to flip those ballots over to go with the referendum to get it passed. As a mayor and trustee, I don't believe I've ever been involved in a referendum. I don't think you guys have either. So this is, for us in Ossining. So this is another expense, by the way, but not a big deal.
We also
so-
have to educate voters about what this is.
So this is where I'm going. So first of
It's
all, the
complicated.
5 of us have to be in support of this for real. And if somebody isn't, publicly or privately, we got to hear about it. 4 of us, right? Excuse me, 4, because one has recused. 4 of us has to be in support of this. Okay, so if somebody isn't, see me at any time, because we don't want any surprises. Number 2, if we go in, my personal belief is we have to go all in. We can't expect these guys in their spare no time to push for this. We're going to have to educate the public, explain why we believe in this, why we've worked on this, and the commitment to it, and get public support so they flip that ballot and vote in the way that we hope they do. Otherwise, it's all for naught and it's complicated. So, I'm in. And I'm not putting anybody on a spot, but I just want to say that it's a big thing. It's not a minor deal. I do have one question that I just thought of when the deputy mayor asked, is this portable? I understand the on-off, you work for 8 years, then you don't make the numbers for 5, then you're back, whatever. But if I'm a firefighter here and then I'm a firefighter where they have low SAP, and I do work there for 8 years, I moved to, I don't know, Mayopac, and they have something, whatever. Is that portable, my 8 years there and my 10 years here? Do they accumulate or not? That was the only thing I don't remember.
So yes and no, it's 2 separate programs. So
Yes
if
and
you,
no.
if you vest here, Ossining is committed to those payouts.
Okay,
If you vest in another municipality, they're committed to those points and those hours. So they would get 2 separate payouts.
but they're not cumulative. So if
No.
you come back to Ossining, it's not like we have to pay, we only pay ours when you're here.
Credit for work you've done here.
Correct. If you do 6 here, leave and go do 6 somewhere else, come back here after those 6 years.
Each
you're
of
at
those
year 7.
pieces are from each municipality.
Correct.
Because they may have a whole different setup somewhere else.
Correct.
Okay. And is it only New York State LoSAP, or is it portable in other states? Or is
That's
that
a
not?
good question. I know I've only been looking into New York.
Well, I'm just saying somebody is in Florida and
Right.
let's say they have it, I don't know. And they did 12 years, I don't know, and they come here. It doesn't matter to us because
Nope.
it's only the years they did here.
and we
So it's
have
not really
members.
that relevant.
And we have
Okay.
members now that qualified in other municipalities that are now in Ossining, and we have nothing to do with that. They'll get their entitlement from that municipality.
Okay, so that answers my question because while intellectually interesting, it doesn't really matter. Okay, great. Did we answer what, do you have what you need for the next meeting?
Almost. I think I would, I'm not sure if I should wait till Friday to hear from trustee Yost. We certainly have time to do that. But also, so I have from the deputy mayor, 3-year look back, 10-year survivor coverage, from the mayor, 2 or 3-year look back, and could be convinced on some level of
Right
survivor
now, I'm leaning
coverage.
towards no, but yeah.
And Trustee White, I don't think I heard a definitive
yeah.
in either.
Where are you with this?
Um,
The look back,
we'll look back, I was 3 years
Okay.
at most.
Survivor?
Survivor.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you two on Zoom.
I'm sorry.
We're
Yeah,
leaning
I'm-
back, yeah.
I'm for Survivor. Is
Okay.
there a limit on how long the Survivor gets?
10
You
years.
think? 10 years.
Yeah.
All right.
So you're going with that, okay, and then the recalibration, are you with,
I don't really understand the discussion about recalibration of the points.
so
and all that
everything's
stuff.
on a points, can we?
Right.
could
So
would
you're
you be
saying we
okay-
have this system, this is what we have, but let's go back and look and make sure that those are the points. we
They
can
want to
give.
know if we have an opinion, like, don't give any points for going to a funeral, for example. We could sit here and go through a
Right.
number of those and go, yes, no, or you said 5, we only want 1. My recommendation is let the committee come back. to
Right,
us,
yeah,
because
exactly.
Otherwise, we're gonna
Yeah.
be here for
No,
hours deciding.
I don't want to sit
So
here and
you're
decide
okay
that.
with let the committee
Yeah.
come back with the understanding where we want the weighted averages. So you got the 3 of us, and Pat will hear this.
I got it.
And
Yeah.
I know he does look at this stuff and he looks at the details, so I'm sure you will get an answer from him as well.
Okay, great. So then the next step is whatever, I'll send an email to the board, and then relay that same information to Penflex so that they can get started once they have the updated census. And then probably within, I think he said like 4 weeks, you'll hear from us again on updated census numbers as well as the points values.
Yeah, I would actually say, what I would really like to do is start looking at the actual referendum, because that will inform me about. I mean, I don't want to keep having meetings where there should be 8 points or 3 points. Just put something out there.
Yeah,
Start
that's-
writing the
That's
referendum.
fine.
Go one step farther than that.
Yep.
Otherwise, I feel like each time we're gonna have to rehash.
That's fine. And just as a reminder, part of Penflex's contract is they write the referendum and do all of
Good.
that stuff
I'd like
for
to
us.
Start looking at that, because there are gonna be vacations, there are gonna be other
Yep.
priorities. And then after all of this time, we're all gonna be sitting around rushing and finding out that to get like the referendum, it's this, I mean, let's move it even farther down the field.
Before we come back.
Let's just.
Understood.
Let's just move it forward.
Happy to.
I think we have the board buy-in on the concept. Thank you, Dale, and everybody else.
But wait,
now
there's
you're
more.
not. Now you're not even raising your hand.
I'm sorry. I just want to like really reiterate to everybody at home watching, to everybody here, like, thank you. Like, it's been a pleasure working on this with you, and everything we've talked about is coming to fruition one way or another. So I really appreciate everybody's time spent on this, the hard work and the back and forth, the transparency. It's been key and it's amazing. Everybody, thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a great learning experience. Much appreciated. Okay, and Maddie, thank you. Dale, I know you put in a lot of work, so also appreciate it there. Good. Are we moving on to the next topic?
We are.
Can we take a 2-minute break because I need to get some water or whatever?
We
Or
can.
Just keep going. I don't really care, but I need to get some water.
Uh,
Thank you, folks.
So our next topic, you know, every year during our reorg meeting, the board approves a management or, you know, approves a management benefit plan. The management benefit plan is specific in that it states that to acquire certain benefits, you retire into the New York State retirement system. However, a few years ago, there is an alternate opportunity for people, and it allows them to vest a little bit sooner, and it's the VDC system. Right now, the management benefit plan is specific, so we want to make sure that in the interest of equity that we're looking at this. I believe the intent is that you serve a certain amount of time, you retire, and then you're provided with certain benefits. Because there was only one way to retire, it was always the New York State retirement system. Now that there are two ways, we want to rectify that. So I'm going to turn it over to our assistant village manager to sort of go over the details of that and bring you up to speed with our recommendation for the management benefit plan going forward.
Okie doke. Thanks, Karen. So there are two versions of the management benefit plan, which again is adopted on an annual basis in resolution format in the agenda for tonight. This is not a departure from anything that we've been doing. This is basically just putting in writing what the practice has been to make it a little bit more clear, particularly as we have some folks on our team who are, you know, a couple years out from retirement, just to make sure that they have this certainty. So Karen sort of touched on the VDC program. This is primarily targeted at folks who come to government later in their careers. So it used to be for a very long time that you only got vested in the New York State retirement system after 10 years. So if, for example, somebody started in a government office at age 60, they might not want to work until they're 70 in order to get a pension. So this was a reasonable alternative. And as Karen mentioned, you vest after 1 year. And obviously the payment structure looks very different. It's not administered by us. It's just a payroll deduction that comes out of folks' paycheck at the percentage that VDC, which is a TIA CREF program, administers. It's only allowed for a very, very discrete group of speakers. You guys are the only one who have anybody who does this. So of course, but it has to be someone who was hired into their position. I believe it's post 2014. So if you were ever in the New York State retirement system anytime before 2014, you're out of luck. You can't be in VDC. Secondly, you have to be unrepresented, which means you can't be covered by a union contract, which basically just leaves you management. And then the third element is your salary must be higher than, I think it's $70,000 a year. So we're really talking a very, very narrow sliver. Yes, a very narrow sliver of folks on any staff that would be eligible, but ours in particular. So when this came up, we took a look at the resolution actually going into the reorg meeting and said, we really are not making any sort of provisions here for folks who are not retiring into the New York State retirement system, but rather who are retiring under the VDC program. The tricky part is that for VDC, there is no set retirement age. I believe there's an age at which you can begin to collect. But you don't retire into any system. You just stop working. And then at some point you begin to collect. So in order to create parity between the New York State retirement system and employees under the VDC, Dale and I have been working on this. Basically right now, for any tiers 1 through 6, the two magic ages insofar as New York State retirement are 55 and 62. So for some tiers, you're allowed to retire at 55, and that's it. For some, you can retire at 55, but you get a reduction in benefits. You pay a penalty. You have to wait until you're 62. So in order to try to be as fair as possible and not say 62, we decided 55. So again, this is not a departure from any policy that we've been doing. This is just to put it in writing so that everyone has that level of comfort. You still need 10 consecutive years in the Village of Ossining in one of these very specific roles, but it just makes the distinction between VDC and New York State retirement. So a couple other things that we added in as long as we were here in cleanup. Because the management benefit agreement follows the CSEA agreement, and the CSEA says that if you were hired in the village before June 1st, 2011, Once you retire, you no longer pay for your health insurance. The same applied to managers who were hired before that date. So we carved that out in here. Again, not a departure from what's been going on, but just making it very plain in the language of the resolution. Further, we thought it wasn't super clear that this coverage applies to not only employees, but also their dependents. So we added that language in. And then we also talked about this is specific for elected officials and deputy corporation counsel, what we're calling category 2. For some reason, it was missing the word vision, so we added the word vision. But then also there was a question about if someone decides that they're going to run for elected office in the village and they win. If you're a full-time employee in local government, you are required to be part of the New York State retirement system. You don't have a choice. You must enroll. It's mandatory that you do so. However, if you're an elected official or if you're part-time, it's not mandatory. So we were trying to understand, is there any benefit or is there any perceived connection for our elected officials and the retirement system? And we decided that your ability as an elected official to get benefits into retirement should not be dependent on whether or not you decide to join the retirement system. So we made that clear here also. I'm happy to answer any questions. Unfortunately, I know way too much about this because VDC came out when I was doing different work for the town of Ossining, and it really threw a wrench in the works at that point. So sort of baptism by fire on that.
Say that the main issue is we're not really changing any benefits. Like everything is.
This is codifying.
If
Yep.
VDC wasn't a factor, we really wouldn't even be having this conversation. It's just that it seemed because it's so few people that this even affects. The intent is you have your 10 years of service, you meet the qualification, you meet these requirements, that's your benefit plan. The fact that there's a slight nuance in where you might retire, how the process of how you're going, or the plan that you're retiring into, seems like it's really shouldn't be that big a consideration. So it's just keeping everything equal and not creating yet another division.
The only other detail that I neglected to mention is when you retire from the New York State retirement system, you can no longer work in public service in most circumstances. You can do a part-time gig so long as your income through municipal work is under a certain threshold, or you can get a waiver until you reach a certain age. There are very specific circumstances where after you start receiving a pension, you can continue to work in municipal government. So another suggestion from Labor Council was not just 55 to create that parity, but also to say the employee ceases public employment immediately following the employee's retirement from the village. So because you're collecting your pension through VDC, we're going to ask that you not go work for the city of White Plains, for example. So basically you'd be ending your municipal career at that point.
I'm sort of trying to figure out how many people this actually applies to in real world.
Without getting too specific, because it's a matter of personnel, fewer than 5.
Fewer than 5. Okay. And what the highest paid folks, I don't even know if they're full-time or almost full-time, are really town employees, and there's IMAs, right? So tax collector, clerk, the village clerk is also a town clerk. They're not, like.
Right. So this only applies to the folks who are listed in the management benefit plan resolution. So it's the village manager, the assistant village manager, secretary to the village manager, the village treasurer, deputy village treasurer, corporation counsel, village engineer, superintendent of water, superintendent of parks and recreation, personnel director, and youth services director. So it's only village employees who are basically department heads not covered by a union contract.
Those are the titles, but that doesn't mean those are the people that are the vast majority of those positions are in the New York State retirement system. So it's a subset of those titles.
And you decide which system you want to be in when?
Upon being
So if you were hired before 2014, you didn't have a choice.
Right.
If you were to get hired in the village of Ossining tomorrow, when the personnel director would sit down with you, she would say, "Okie doke, have you been in the New York State retirement system before?" And if you said, "Yes, I have," you don't have a choice. If you said, "Never, no," then you do have a choice.
And can you change
No.
once you're
No.
done?
Once you're in, you're in.
Okie dokie. Those are my questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, just so if I'm, excuse me, if I'm understanding it right, I retire from Ossining. I'm in the pension system now.
It's who are you? Are you elected official or
No,
you,
no,
you
just
okay.
an employee that retired, did their civil service.
One of these managers listed here?
Right.
Okay.
You're putting a stipulation in that if White Plains wants to hire me part-time, I couldn't work for them.
So again, the
My
reason,
understanding of New York State employment, when you're the pension system, that you can go get another job, you usually have a threshold that you can't make more
that's
than.
exactly right. That's
Okay.
exactly right. So again, to try to create parity between New York State retirement system retirees and VDC retirees, I don't know who's contemplating getting a career, after they leave here if they're part of VDC. I don't know what people's future plans are. But exactly to your point, say I'm 65 years old and I decide I'm hanging it up, and then City of White Plains calls me and says, boy, we really need an assistant village manager like yesterday. If I'm over 65, that's no problem because I've aged out. I can make as much money as I want. But say it's me and I'm 55 and White Plains offers me the same deal. I can't make more than $30,000 a year working in municipal government. I can still collect my pension and I can get up to $30,000 in White Plains. But after that, they're going to take my pension back.
Similar to the way Social Security works.
Sure.
But you did mention a waiver.
It's very, very complicated. So if you are, it really doesn't even apply to what we're talking about right now. But like if, for example, I was 55 and I retired and the City of White Plains said, we need a new commissioner of city sidewalks and it pays $250,000 a year. Even though New York State Retirement would say, well, you can't take that because you're under the age, you're collecting a pension, you could get a waiver that says, I am uniquely qualified to be the commissioner of city sidewalks. Nobody else can do this but me, and this is the price I demand, and White Plains has to pay me. And the New York State Retirement System would have to decide whether or not they would grant that
So
waiver.
it's rather high threshold.
I'd say so, yes.
Any other questions?
Are you asleep yet?
Yeah, but it's only a parity between two systems. It's if you're in the New York State system, this is not actually.
This does not apply to you if you are already in the New York State Retirement
Right,
System. This is
to the
only,
handful of people who,
yes.
for whatever reason, have opted at some point or will opt in future hires. So if you're in the New York State system, none of this, that's not what we're doing here tonight.
It's just exactly right, Mayor. It's just basically saying if you choose this alternative retirement system, you don't have worse or better benefits than your counterpart who chose the retirement system instead.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other,
So-
Dana, question? Dana, we're good? All right.
All right. So if we're all good, we'll put a resolution on for next week. Thank you very
So
much.
put in the names of the positions because it's not categories, it's these positions.
It's these positions. The
simple.
last time it was changed, to my knowledge, was when we started the Youth Bureau and we hired a youth services director. We added that position to the list.
Because that's manager.
Yep.
Right. Correct. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. So the next item up on the agenda is we're going to talk about amendments to the event policy, and these to a certain extent the event policy doesn't really talk about. We have locations where we do events. The event policy is really more about size of events and resources for the events. And typically, though, that will dictate where you might hold an event. As I think everybody knows, we have had many events over the many years in the Market Square area, the post office parking lot on Main Street. When we started talking about the DRI projects, there was a lot of concern amongst the businesses about disruption during that time and making sure that they were still able to carry out their business and that they wouldn't be hurt by any of this disruption. There's also, in parallel with that, had been concerns about, as we get more businesses on Main Street, closing the street for the whole day actually was hurting some businesses. In fact, most of the businesses really felt that that was a deterrent to their businesses in most cases, not all. But so we started looking at this and knowing that 2025, we anticipated that we'd be breaking ground on the multimodal transportation hub parking lot. We basically told people And these are people who've been doing events for many years. So the Hispanic Festival, the Portuguese Festival, the Chamber of Commerce, people who've used these spaces to have their events that, you know, we're telling you now, it's 2024. This is probably going to be your last year that you're going to be able to do the event in these locations until the work's completed. And then we can reevaluate, because when the work's completed, and we're talking really probably 2028, the post office parking lot will no longer be a parking lot. So that's not going to be an option, but we will have a newly landscaped market square that could facilitate different types of events and different types of street closing based on what works for the businesses as well. Right now, we do anticipate we'll be talking about the multimodal hub tonight, but really we're done with the plans. We anticipate that we're going to go out to bid very soon, and that we will be doing, if not, well, I don't think we will break ground on the actual site by June. We will be doing prep work on the site. So there's trees that have to be taken down. There's some, I'm sorry,
Staging
utilities,
area, there's also
utilities,
staging areas.
staging. So it will, the likelihood that we will be active on that site and it will not be available. This is the Brandreth parking lot, will not be available for parking by June 1st is pretty good. Everything's subject to change, but if we were to allow somebody to plan for something in June, I can't guarantee that that parking lot, the Brandreth parking lot, will be open. And if the Brandreth parking lot is closed and we're closing the I'm sorry, I'm losing my words tonight. The post office parking lot, that is going to have an impact on the businesses, and we had promised them we wouldn't do that. So right now we are telling people that for the time being, while we're working on these DRI projects starting June 1st, 2025, and extending till the completion of these projects, which I would anticipate would be 2028 sometime, and we'll keep updated on that timeline, that we will not be holding events in any events that disrupt parking further or close streets for prolonged periods of time, because it really is our main objective on Main Street is to make sure that the businesses are thriving. So we are recommending, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the policy, but it's something that we're pushing out there, and we can put it on the, on the website, that these locations will not be available for certain large scale events. There may be other things, there may be things that people want to do on Main Street that are smaller or that the stores are behind that we can consider. But our traditional large scale events where we're closing down streets, closing down parking lots for extended period of time, really would be problematic for the businesses. So that's an update. So I just wanted to update the board. This does not require a resolution. It really is just a decision that we're going to have to all be in agreement on based on the conversations that we've had with the businesses over time. And I think we've been talking about this for a while, and we're finally at the point where we are going to be breaking ground on projects starting in June.
So question,
Other locations that people can consider?
Well, all of the other locations, there's parks, there's the waterfront, which is the town park, which is really the most conducive, to be honest, even separate from the work that we're doing. The businesses, there are times where you have 2 or 3 or 4 Saturdays in a summer that the streets are shut down. That really hurts some of our businesses very bad, some less so, and maybe a few benefit, but by and large, the negative impact on businesses is far greater. So we've already been trying to encourage people to look at other sites when possible. The waterfront is the most viable site because it really is a beautiful site. There's parking, and it's not necessarily as disruptive to residences or businesses, and sound isn't as much of an issue. So that is a town park, although we could do some things at Gordine Park. I would say Gordine Park does present some, you're getting, the minute you get closer to a residence or a business that you're impacting, you have to be sensitive to that. Any other park in the town or village that has events is viable. However, some are not as conducive to larger scale events and events. Many of our village parks are in very residential neighborhoods with somewhat limited parking, and we do have to take those into consideration based on the nature of the event.
Because I do remember the Hispanic Festival was in Nelson Park one year.
And that actually,
big.
The challenge there was we did get a lot of complaints from the neighbors, noise, parking, and it's not that we couldn't do it, but event organizers may have to change the format somewhat or the hours of the events to accommodate certain locations. But the Hispanic Festival, I think the waterfront offers a very viable alternative for the Hispanic Festival and the Portuguese Festival and other festivals of that nature. And we do have festivals down there that do very well down at the waterfront, and people like to go to them. So change is hard, but it's also good that we have a lot more businesses on Main Street, and that wasn't always true years ago, which made Main Street a more viable place for event, but we have a bustling Main Street. We want to keep it that way, especially during this construction period.
So I guess the question becomes vis-a-vis the village fair, for example. Will it ever happen again in the way that it used to? Down Main Street. again?
So I think that the biggest issue with the village fair, and I think that, I wouldn't want to necessarily, the village fair was a Chamber of Commerce event historically. A Chamber of Commerce event has to have businesses behind it. And if the businesses on Main Street said, this is the chamber representing those businesses said, this is what we want to do. We think it's going to be great. We want to shut down the street for business. Of course, we would consider that. We cannot consider a location for an event where the people immediately impacted by that event are going to be hurt in any way by it. So that's really the issue. So I think that we will have a beautiful space in a newly landscaped market square that could be great for gatherings. Having a building right across the street with some storefronts on Spring Street could allow for different types of closures and events. But when it comes to events in your business district, the number one thing is those events really should be driving business and benefiting those businesses. So I think that would be what the criteria would be to determine what we would do going forward.
So just to piggyback off of that, because you talk about hopefully June 1st, we're breaking ground or making progress. All right,
We'll
the
be
brands are slot,
changing
the
them.
brands are slot won't be available. And you're gonna have the post office parking. This leads to where parklets. Talking about not taking spaces away.
It's a good point.
Very good point.
That's a good point.
I'm in
If
favor.
we do that now, I don't have to come back to another work session. So I'm happy
So,
to.
I mean, we did the parklets for COVID. It's now 5 years later. If the businesses have not thrived in these past 5 years, I really don't believe those sidewalk parklets made that big of a difference. My opinion, it's nice, but parking's going to be of the premium now.
We had talked about parklets, that once we start with these programs, that, the more parking we take away, the less parking there is for the stores. So that is a decision, and before you know it, we'll be talking about, we'll be entering parklet season. So I think that's a really good point. And direction from the board on that of what you would like to do with parklets going forward. would be
I'd hate
helpful.
to see, we make a decision, and then they start, and then we're sending DPW back out there again to take them apart. Just need to cut the strings.
We probably should be also, it would be helpful if the board could weigh in on parklets as well.
Yeah, I'd want to hear from the people who've done parklets, the businesses, and hear from them as well. I think some benefit more than others, but
What's the difference between the parklet and like sidewalk cafes? Because most of these are restaurants. It's not like the dry
This-
cleaner is
The
doing
parklet
parklet.
was done because of COVID.
I know I was done, but
And-
what's
and
the
what we
physical
did-
difference?
We did make some changes to our sidewalk cafe. We have waived the fee for sidewalk cafes since COVID. The sidewalk cafe, obviously the more real estate you have to put out tables, the more potential you have for business. However, we allow sidewalk cafes or outdoor dining all year round on the sidewalk, regardless of whether you have a parkland or not, as long as you can clear a 4 foot walkway for ADA accessibility. Doesn't work in every location in the village, and this is always the challenge with parklets too. They work in very, very few locations in the village for the businesses, for restaurants. They're not very many, there's really only a handful of restaurants that can take advantage of them. Sidewalk cafes are not going to be an issue. People can still do their sidewalk cafes. It may reduce their outdoor seating a bit, but they absolutely can still do them.
Well, the idea of the outdoor seating is because they weren't allowed to be inside. That was the whole idea behind this.
Correct.
So as far as I'm concerned, it's a moot point. They're open, they're fully open. We're not worried about this anymore, and we're going to need parking.
I think my point, Bob, is I understand the reason. I also have to say that sometimes out of COVID came things like a lot of usage of Zoom. So there may be advantages to allowing businesses to do better. It's a nice look for a river town that people are outdoor having coffee, eating, drinking. If there's a way without losing parking spaces, then I don't know if I'm against it. I understand why it started, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't allow folks to have it who are serving food or whatever. I mean, clearly in Manhattan, they've cleared out almost all of them at this point, and in other communities. We're not big enough. White Plains has created an outdoor environment because the government building area is like a ghost town on the weekend, so why not? Tarrytown does it like once a month, maybe, but they've had a lot of issues with that. So I think it does require some thinking. I don't have a problem that something starts because of COVID. Doesn't mean because COVID is over, we should eliminate if it's working. I think Dana's point is accurate. There were only about 6 places, right? 6 we're talking about? 7? It's not more than 10.
It's not more than that.
All right, let's
Yeah.
get some feedback, what it really did, because some of them sat empty and some of them it really helped. But if there's a way to do it without giving up parking, which is what you're talking about, we should what's
So-
what's so bad about helping a
No,
business?
I have no problem with doing that,
There's-
as long as we're not
the
giving up
goal is to
parking.
take up Parking, so
Right.
like if you,
No,
you're
that's what
taking
I'm
away
saying.
parking.
Yeah.
If you want to, again, there's never a rule against outdoor cafes. That's a given. You can do that if, whenever you want. And we did have, the ability, some businesses did want outdoor seating into the colder months. So that's permissible. We've been waiving the fee up until, this point. We can waive it one more year we weren't charging a very high fee for it to begin with. If we want to do that to ease the, separation from the actual parklet, I do think eventually, like, we have to, probably this is a conversation that's going to have to be had at a certain point. The parklets, definitely have pros and cons. And that's why there's not a lot in the city. We do have some of the issues that you have in the
filth
city.
that gathers under those boards and the cleanliness and all of that
Well,
stuff.
That happens here
it's
too,
a-
so.
That's what I just
yeah.
said. It's a real health hazard and nobody cleans under it and there's all sorts of stuff. So I think not to table it, but this has to be discussed pretty soon because we're going to be entering the spring.
I would
really soon.
imagine, we can, I would imagine historically, obviously, the people who have them like them and would probably. I
Well, it
would assume
increases their
like-
square footage without them paying for more. I mean, this is not a big.
Anecdotally, that the parklets were less busy last summer
Yeah.
than previous.
Yeah, and that was, and we were charging significantly less than most communities charge for those things. So those are things, it probably determine, the fees, what we want to do going forward, how we want to best support the businesses. There are businesses that do feel that the parklets take away parking that their store can be, so it's a challenge.
Let's go back to the macro conversation. This was a footnote that was brought in that we need to approach, discuss. We're going to the spring. March is like right around the corner. So I think it's a super valid point. We're basically saying that we're going to close down we're not going to allow main arteries and venues in our village to be closed down. You either have to get private space. Many municipalities have shut down all of these huge events.
I'm not sure there's data that supports that it brings a ton of business. Now, look, Sleepy Hollow does a big Halloween thing. They're the world's epicenter for Halloween. It also costs them tens of thousands of dollars to run that program. It's a whole business in and of itself. Um, we have more businesses, I think, thankfully. We also have many more residences living in our village. And as we increase housing, which is another piece of what this board has agreed to do, people have to be able to get in and out of their houses and out of their apartment buildings and get their cars off the curbs to be able to move around, which we've had issues with. So, I think for the next 3 years, we're simply going to have to announce that we're not going to be able to have big events unless you find private venues, parks that may accommodate you or not. That means you have to have parking. And most places that do events want lots and lots of people to come from everywhere. That's the goal for whoever is doing it. The problem here is you have to limit to 500 or so people because you have a parking issue. You know, we're not on an island here. People live in these communities. All the parks are built in residential areas. That's a good thing, right? You walk out your house, you got a park. That's lovely. They're not really designed for, 500 cars to be parked, plus the vendor trucks and all the other people that are involved in it. So I think we're basically saying, unless somebody says otherwise, of why we're not going to close streets down for events except for things like, July 3rd and, some of the civic events that belong to the municipality, their town or village itself.
And we did
for next 3
there is
years.
that big 4th of July down at the waterfront, which is a
3rd of
huge
July, but
event,
yeah,
3rd of July.
yeah.
I mean, there are still events that will continue. There will
Of course
be
there are.
Earth Day, but there are just some that happen downtown where it's just not going to be easy to accommodate that.
Well, we're not gonna be able to close the streets down. We have like 35 to 42 events in the summer, free and family oriented, plus the community center events. There are gonna be lots of events, but they don't shut down the street. And some of the folks have already been told last year.
Right.
And it'll start, I was hoping you can move it to July and maybe do a couple, but it sounds like June for the next 3 years, unless
and
something changes.
Paul is on to, I spoke to him about this. It's very possible, like, look, it's really hard to judge. And as the best laid plans, no matter how conservative we are in our timing, things take longer, always. But while I don't necessarily think we'll be breaking ground on June 1st, and we may still be finalizing contracts with whoever is selected
Right.
from the bid, the reality is the site preparation work will need to, for us to be able to really hit the ground running and get this thing done in time so that we're not extending the length of the project
We also
overall.
have to have for the trucks and stuff. So 30 Water Street, they have trucks, they have lifts, they have all this stuff. They have people who work there, have to park their cars somewhere. You got the commuters. So we've already learned in one. I mean, we also have private things. Open Door, still doing a lot of their construction, may not be a village, but that entire lot is still not being used. And they're taking up sidewalk. That's a part of it's all good stuff. We are doing big, bold infrastructure investments. That said, we have a densely populated village. We got to figure out what we want to do. We've been talking about this for 2 years. The Olive Opera House, that's moving forward. The town's moving forward with their park, with the bathrooms and the stage. I've been talking about that for 5 years. There's just every corner community center. And, every time you shut one thing down, you got to find place for employees, residents, businesses, et cetera. So you got to move everybody to another spot.
Right.
We don't have enough space, frankly, in the parks. I don't know how many cars some of these parks can hold, but the waterfront still remains a viable source. But 3 years is probably a realistic sort of number of, we're not going to shut down the streets for any of these things. And I don't see any other way unless somebody comes up with it. So I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but unless somebody totally disagrees, we're just going to have to make that a statement. We're good? Okay, Karen, I think we're up to the next item.
Okay, I did just want to add on this too, that in addition, 2 things. We'll bring parklets back to the next work session too, because those typically start in April, so we probably should get ahead of it. It will be April before you know it.
I want you to let the people who have parklets be notified. I don't want to run in here and say, look, I didn't know you were going to discuss it. Nobody told me.
No, that's
Well,
why we'll
They
we'll
have to be
schedule it.
notified
we'll
that this is where we're leaning. They could look at this meeting.
We'll
and-
schedule it for probably the next work session. We'll schedule it. For the other event issue, and I just want to flag this because we will be coming back with a recommendation too for processions. The Davino Nino procession, which is the annual Christmas procession that St. Anne's does, was very large this year. And it took an enormous amount of resources, our entire working police department, and it's sometimes hard to get people who are working overtime. It really exceeded the capacity, there were two things that happened. It was very hard to manage safely. And it took resources that we really couldn't, if there had been an accident or a call somewhere else, we would have been in a position where we didn't have enough police coverage in the village. We've spoken to St. Anne's with Father Elvin about this, the chief and the captain and I. We are looking at ways to facilitate processions, but in a way that can be better organized. We're considering limiting the number of people who can participate in the procession, looking at alternate routes because crossing Route 9, especially with over 2,000 people, is not safe. And in addition, the primary concern is safety. There were some things happening that, we don't allow for candy to be thrown out and things because you had kids running around the street. So there were some things that we have to tighten up on that. A procession's a little bit different than a parade. A parade is a very highly organized event. A procession is a little bit more amorphous, and it was challenging this year. So we have talked to St. Anne's and Father Elvin about that. We will be coming back to the board too, and maybe we can do it at the same work session with a recommendation to just be able to control those processions in a way that really preserves everybody's safety and also mitigates any traffic disruption, because that was the other issue.
Just to touch on something that you had mentioned, for the first responders that day, very challenging. Very challenging. We actually had guys standing by and alternate routes and updates, and it's just very challenging, especially.
Offline, if we can talk about that too, so I can gather that information too, so we can have that considered as well, that would be helpful. So, great. The next topic up for discussion is, we were talking about the multimodal hub. The transportation hub is subject to the state environmental quality review process, otherwise known as seeker. So that does require us to name a lead agency, and it's a process that we can do simultaneously as we go forward to bid, so it doesn't delay the project at all, but it is something that the board needs to be aware of. And I am going to turn it over to Stuart to talk about some of the finer details of what that involves for the board.
Thank you. There will be a resolution next week for the board declaring its intent to be lead agency with regard to multimodal. That will start a 30-day clock. We will send out notices to the other involved agencies in this case, which would be the County Department of Health, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. It may also involve the Department of State because they are the funding agency, and they become involved agencies. We will also be notifying state parks. While work is not being done directly on the aqueduct, there is work that is coming up to grade and being done in the vicinity of the aqueduct. Once, and presumably this board becomes lead agency, the board then has to make a determination of environmental significance with regard to the project. It's my view that this is a type 1 project. It's a type 1 project, and just for the folks in the audience, way Seeker has it, there are type 1 projects, there are type 2 projects, and there are unlisted projects. If a project is a type 2, constructing a single-family home, for example, no environmental review is required. So it's either then type 1 or unlisted. The reason that this would become a type 1 action is because it involves the construction of a garage of approximately 240 spaces, and it is adjacent to parkland, in this case, the old Croton Aqueduct Trailway. And that is a very specific delineation in the type 1 structure. Goes by percentages and things like that. So this would be a type 1. The type 1, initially, you're going to have to, you would prepare what's called a long form environmental assessment form. The type 1, the part 1 of that form is required to be sent around to all the parties as part of the lead agency determination. Assuming there is no objection, then in 30 days, which would put us in early April, the board would be able to declare itself as lead agency and could then begin the process of determining the environmental significance of this action. If it is determined that there is a significant adverse environmental effect as a result of the multimodal transportation hub, then you would have to go through the process of an environmental impact statement, scoping, and everything that is involved there. If the board determines that there are no adverse environmental impacts, then it would be a negative declaration. And basically at that point, it stops. That determination is published in the Environmental Notice Bulletin, which is a state document that is put out by the DEC. But that's really what the next process is. But this process does require environmental review. For that matter, just so the board is aware, so will the community center work, but that most likely would be a type 2 action because it is all internal. Finally, if you're just wondering with regard to the road diet also requires environmental review. That's a little bit more complicated because that also requires what's called NEPA, which is the National Environmental Plan Act. That is federal seeker, essentially. But again, because of the nature of the work, that is also from the seeker perspective, most likely a type 2, which means that there will be no environmental review required by the village. But here, with regard specifically to multimodal, because it will be a type 1 action, it does require a declaration of lead agency status. So that's next week. There'll be a resolution for this board to basically give its notice of intention to be lead agency. As I said, that notice then gets sent out, 30 days pass, and then the board can then actually become lead agency and start the environmental review process. And as Karen said, you can work in parallel paths. What you can't do is start the project until you have actually made your environmental significance determination. And that's that.
Great. So that's on for next week. Got it.
Great. The next topic is I want to talk to you about some grant opportunities and specifically EV charging stations, the installation of EV charging stations at the community center. And Andy and Paul are on Zoom. Andy's been working on this and has been tremendously helpful in putting together the information that we need to submit the grant. So as you know, Pete Harcum, Senator Pete Harcum had granted, we have $100,000 for Youth Bureau hybrid vans. We just got literally, Stuart, that hopefully signed today too. We just signed the grant disbursement agreement, which means we can go out and purchase those vans. And we're set right now. They're hybrid vans. We have charging available for them, but it's somewhat limited. That said, it's doable. However, subsequent to getting the $100,000 for the hybrid vans, we got another grant from Senator Harcum that he gave same amount to all his municipalities. This grant is a little broader in scope, but you can use it for equipment or charging stations, things like that. And we decided charging stations, getting grant money for charging stations specific for municipal use is really challenging to get. Most of the money out there for charging stations is for resident use, public use, which makes sense. It's grant funded, it's taxpayer dollars. So having the ability to use this $100,000 for municipal charging made a lot of sense, because we are going, in addition to the hybrid vans, we are electrifying our fleet, and we are working on, continuing to green our fleet in all our various departments. So we would like to submit a grant application for $100,000 for the charging station. The charging stations, depending on the length of the warranty range, with a 1-year warranty, it's a little about $90,000, and with a 5-year warranty, it's like $130,000. So basically, the $100,000 will cover the charging stations. We would like to have these installed in the upper parking lot at the community center. And there is a Con Ed benefit too. So if you install level 3 rapid chargers, you can get a 50% rebate from Con Edison. This is through NYSERDA, and it is a federal program that will be available for 2025. I don't know whether it will be available in the future, but it is available in 2025. So we can get up to half the cost of the infrastructure that we do need to incorporate in order to facilitate the charging stations. So I had sent an email with some of the detail on this. Essentially, we're looking at right now, we would need a board resolution to apply for $100,000 for the purchase of 2 level 3 charging stations, which would actually accommodate up to 4 vehicles. A resolution authorizing the electrical contractor's work for the infrastructure and installation of the charging stations, which is estimated at $155,000. And a resolution authorizing me to sign Con Ed's Make Ready program agreement, which would provide 50% reimbursement on that $155,000, bringing the cost down to $77,000 for the village. So that's what we're looking at. We did look at a range of different options. We felt that this was the best recommendation because while hybrid vans don't necessarily need rapid chargers, we do have electric vehicles at the community center. They're town vehicles, but they're taking up space in the lower parking lot where chargers are. They're slower chargers. So having those fast chargers would be an advantage because we can take bigger vehicles out of the lower lot and free up some space. The vans can be charged in the lower lot. And it also, with the 4 4 ports, we have ability to then charge other vehicles in our fleet from other departments as well. So all told, this, if we were to do this with no grant money, we're talking about a project that's almost $300,000. With grant money, the net cost is $118,000 to the village. And the work would have to be done in 2025 to get the money from Con Ed. And typically for a CREST grant, you have 3 years to do it. So once you apply for the grant, for a CREST grant, typically it takes about 6 months to get approved. So this is very doable within 2025. The work that has to be done for the charging station is a few days work. It's not months or anything like that. So, and by that time we might actually have the vehicles, which if we order now might take at least 6 months.
So the 300 plus 118 does not include the vans?
No, the vans are separate. The vans would be covered under the other grant.
And the 100,000 doesn't cover didn't we add 25,000 to the vans?
We said we could go up to $115,000. The vans that the list estimate is I think $52,000 each. Yeah, it's possible that when we go actually to order them, they may not even be that, they may not even be that expensive. But we won't exceed $115,000 on the vans. That based on the resolution that was passed.
So my question is to Andy. Or Paul or Andy, whoever can. I'm going to presume that the infrastructure that's in the community center is capable of hold this, and we're not going to be seeing that we're going to have to upgrade anything.
So yeah, good question. So the infrastructure in the community center is maxed out. So with the option 2 was to look for level 2 chargers, so we didn't have to go this route. The downside is that we'd have to change the transformer outside. We'd have to do a lot of the same infrastructure work, but because Con Ed has the incentive program for the level 3 chargers at 50%, level 2, they will only give us $10,000. So it really doesn't pay.
10%. So
10%,
level,
yeah.
for the level, the incentive is for the fast chargers.
Mhm.
So you get 50% on the fast chargers.
Right.
For the level 2 chargers, you only get 10%. So,
But the level 2s don't require the infrastructure that the level 3s do.
actually, this is what Andy can speak to more specifically. The cost is going to be comparable because of the replacement of the transformer that's required for the level
Correct.
2 chargers. So
Or
And we have to, and Bob, just so you know, we'd have to bring a bigger service in. We'd have to change the switch gear, and our boxes in the building are maxed out. There are no spare breakers.
so what about setting a separate service off at a pole just for those chargers with another meter?
You can, but the problem
And not
was
affect,
is
not affect the community center.
yeah. What Pedro looked at PRM was that we'd have to change the transformer by the dumpsters, so that would have to be upgraded where that is, and we'd still have to run conduits, and we'd have to run wires. And he's expecting it would cost at least 70,000 for that. So basically, be putting level 2 chargers in, spending the same money that you would get for level 1 chargers
the
or level 3
chargers
chargers.
also only have 2 ports.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean,
so
I'm all for the better chargers. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
My concern is it's a lot of upgrades to make this
absolutely.
happen. So my question is, do they have to change the transformer? Or can a separate service be brought in off the street? Specifically, whether it's a 200 amp service, whatever it is, and set a separate meter, separate panel outside just for the chargers and not touch anything going into the community center.
Yeah, what Pedro looked at that. So what he said was the transformer I just talked about had to be replaced. And that's the transformer that's right by the dumpsters, that he expected that part of the job to be at least 50,000, not including the conduits, the wire, and a sub panel off of that.
But
Not
Con
getting it
Edison-
off the, not getting it. I know what you're saying. Getting it off the pole on the street.
Yep.
Then you'd have to run the conduits twice as long across the whole parking lot too. So we could
Understood.
have him price that option out, but he was looking at the transformer option.
But the transformer should be replaceable from Con Edison, correct? You're upgrading the service. They should be wanting to give you that transformer.
But they're not gonna pay for the install.
True. Well, they're going to set the
It's
transformer.
a
Con Ed
huge
would come out,
transformer. Yeah.
Con Ed would come out and drop the transformer.
But, and the other thing too is what Pedro said, we'd have to shut the community center down for 2 days to do that job. Because that would shut down the power to the whole building.
Oh, yeah, well, of course. All right. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just think
So
about.
much to maybe other people's surprise, as you know, I am all electric, all my vehicles, I have been for years. We're losing track here. I am not in support of any of this. Vans can run on gas. They're still twice as efficient. We're redoing the community center. I don't have faith in what I'm hearing here. No offense, gentlemen. We're building like, a Porsche here. We're buying like a Prius and building a Porsche to support the Prius. It's ridiculous. This is a ridiculous amount of money to be spent because the community center can't handle it. And we're about to redo the community center. My guess is 2 years from now, we're going to find out we probably put this in the wrong place because something came up and it's all built into concrete. I would rather wait on all this. These grants are not gifts. They are just not gifts. get the vans because the kids can use them, put a policy in place. We have other chargers for all I care. Go to the Arcadian and, get your gas at gas stations and go to the Arcadian or go to the operations center till you guys figure out what the community center looks like. This build out is not worth the juice that this is from my perspective, and I am really familiar with this stuff. And I can go into all different options, but honestly, there are places where these vans can go. And when the vans are used for long distance to go up to Albany, because that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about them running over to CVS to get water bottles for an event. We're talking about a use of this. We haven't mentioned, what are we getting vans for them in the first place for? My thought is that they're going long distance. In that case, they're going to need to get gas anyway. They're highly efficient on gas. This is not the issue. It's not an electric vehicle that you have to have it. For this price, you could buy the Youth Bureau 3 Teslas. It'll be cheaper, and you go over to the Arcadian and spend 20 minutes and get them filled up. At some point, we have to do reality checks. I love this stuff. You all know that. This is a ridiculous amount of money. And Con Ed keeps raising the price. I have solar panels. Con Ed has raised costs on me twice already. Making it actually not so cheap to have solar panels anymore. So I'm not, this is too much money to be spent in this way on a community center that's about to be totally redone. Now, I know we're not doing the outside, but I'm 100% sure things will change. We should keep in mind, and if we miss this grant, I'm hoping there'll be another grant. The vans are already going to cost us more than the original 100,000. We're already spending more than we thought. And then, of course, we're going to have to put, gonna have to paint it. They're gonna need this. We need everything costs more. This is starting out, in my opinion. I've talked to you about it. There are places to get these things charged up. The Youth Bureau folks can go in, and if they're going to Albany, that charge they're getting for what,
Well,
40,
yeah.
50 miles? They can't
Understood.
get to Albany. They're gonna have to get gas anyway. They're hybrid. They run
Yep.
on gas. And by the way, hybrids, I drive an old one, 2007. Still, to this day, 200,000 miles on it still gets amazing mileage. It's filled with gas. It's not plugged in. So you don't need electrification for that. And there are other alternatives that should be considered. I really would rather consider the charging stations, a new built out. Once we get moving on actually renovating the community center, once we know, because we're going to need, if we're already at capacity, Bob, you and I have to believe that we're going to need some changes in that. So keep this in the back burner and let's wait for another grant at another time. My opinion, this is just too much.
Well, we can repurpose, first of all.
No, we haven't
you
heard
know,
from the other two trustees.
Yeah, so, but
And Bob
any
didn't say he's
comments?
opposed to it. He said he actually likes the idea. I don't know. I don't know what you actually ended up with.
That if the community center is maxed out and we've got to do a lot of infrastructure work just to support a couple of chargers, I don't see it being
Oh,
viable.
okay. I didn't understand that.
I didn't say that, but
I didn't know
you
that
took
was
off with the
included.
conversation, so I let you go.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear the conclusive part about it. Thoughts on this?
I'd like to hear from you, Madam Manager, if possible, just a response from what the mayor said. That'd be helpful.
So I think that's a valid point. And I think when we get these opportunities, we're looking at array of things. So it is to just charge. So I think the decision here is this is a little bit of the challenge we have on the electric vehicles. All of our buildings are basically maxed out.
Yep.
So the challenge for the electric is that if we want to green the fleet, if we want more electric, just forget about the hybrids. If we want more electric vehicles, which has been sort of the charge that we've been told, before the charge that we have, this is a way to get funding for level 3 high power chargers that will better charge all electric vehicles. It's hard money to get. On any given day, I don't see that being a federal funding stream in the near future. So that money may go away. So it really isn't, but I do understand also, so this was a way to get that, and the value of upgrading the capacity at the community center is that's where we have the parking available, and we already have electric vehicles that would benefit from them, and they're large, and if we move them up to the upper level. So that was really the reason that we were pursuing that option. Even though it doesn't have to, specifically for the youth bureau vans, it's not as big an issue. It's a broader issue of, we had an opportunity to get a discount on charging stations that are very hard to get discounts for when you're talking about solely municipal use. Again, the challenge that we have at every single building is that none of our buildings can handle the capacity. All of them would require this or similar type of infrastructure work to incorporate these charging stations. That said, it's always possible. Things change. We decide not to get more electric vehicles. We get bicycle. I don't know. Like, a lot of things are changing, and things are changing literally as we speak. So we can repurpose the $100,000 for the charging stations could be applied to a different project. It's basically capital equipment costs, things like that. So we could still keep that $100,000 and use it for something else that's already in our capital plan, and just offset that cost and save money that way too. It's really just a decision, and this is really a board decision on what opportunities you want to take advantage of. What we can come back again at the next work session is with an idea for, another grant opportunity if the board's in agreement that they don't want to invest this much money or time at this point in the charging stations.
What did the town do with this $100,000 for electrification? They also got $100,000.
They got $100,000, but again, that $100,000 was for equipment use and things. I think they used it for, I don't know what they used it for.
I think they're using it to get the superintendent an electric truck.
Where are they going to charge it?
I don't know,
Will you
but
be
they're
fine?
a full, not hybrid, full electric.
A truck?
Yeah,
They're buying a Ford Lightning.
but where would they charge it?
I have no idea.
We didn't have that discussion with them.
Drag an
but they-
extension cord from the highway trailer.
All right, okay. So,
Did you say for the supervisor?
Oh,
no, highway superintendent, no.
that's for Pete to worry about.
Got it.
Liz
Okay,
is
okay.
getting,
Well, no, because they also
Yeah.
got it. They clearly didn't prioritize this. Okay, I mean, they had a different priority. In other words.
so,
And
again,
so
those are what,
Omar, you had the money.
Yeah.
Yep. So my sense is that probably getting the internal combustion engine vans is going to be the move here, but I came in neutral. I didn't expect as strong a perspective from my colleagues, and so I'm swayed by that. I remain generally neutral, but the biggest element for me is the amount of change that's happening to the community center over the course of the next few years. I would want that to kind of settle and then do something of this magnitude. That's where I am.
You're saying we should get, instead of the hybrid vans.
no, the
combustion
hybrid
cell.
vans we can get no matter what, like,
No,
Aren't
we'll
they?
take the hybrid
Okay,
van.
So-
aren't they self,
yeah, the hybrid, so the hybrid vans don't require
right,
the charging stations. Like,
right.
we had talked about it as increasing. We don't have a lot of municipal charging stations. And again, if you have hybrid, you do want to charge them, take advantage of that. But they don't require this the level 3 chargers. They just don't. There are other vehicles that could, but so this is really the idea was, it's just hard to get the funding for municipal chargers. That said, we can use that $100,000. The $100,000 for the hybrid cars we're going to purchase them.
And the other
That's done.
100 is from where?
Both $100,000, both grants are from Pete Harcum. There is an array of capital equipment and things that we can use. The $100,000 that we want, we were proposing to put to the chargers, we can put it towards something else. That's doable. I'm sure that we have any number of vehicles. A lot of the municipalities were using it for vehicle purchases. So I'm sure that we could put it towards some sort of purpose. I have to look at the specifics. So we probably can repurpose it. It's just that, again, a lot of times though, it is for hybrid or more fuel efficient or electric vehicles that these grants are coming from, and our charging options are somewhat limited. So that was the rationale. However, the challenge that we have on all our buildings is we just don't have the ability to just put a charger with the existing electrical capacity at our buildings. And that's just sort of the dilemma we're in. At some point, that's a, you know, and that could be a very different subject, but we would have to, you know, if we're committed to greening the fleet, that does have to be a consideration at some point. But the timing of this, I do, you know, I think the board is making very fair points. But I just want to put the perspective out there that, you know, there's a lot of things we can do. And we just have to decide what we want to do most.
The thing also about hybrids is, and the more electric stations there are at the communities, there's nothing that says that you have to have it as part of your municipality. If the Arcadian puts in more chargers, they have both chargers. You know, you can go somewhere else and get it charged. It's not like you have to have your own
Well,
charging.
if you were charging municipal, I honestly, I think that we
Oh,
may
really?
have. I'd have to look into it. I don't think that if we were, you know, I don't necessarily think we can charge like electric municipal vehicles.
I
Like
have
if
a
we-
lot of electric. We went with the police because hybrid. That's why.
Right, but what I'm
hybrids
saying
make
is like
sense.
probably, but
Road
what I'm
inspectors,
saying
yeah.
is, again, the like separate from the hybrids, if we decide to continue to green our fleets and we're getting
Right.
electric trucks and stuff, we would have to have
Well,
our own.
As I said, once you look at the community center and once we get really into it, then we see the whole plan of what we
That's
need.
fine.
And then we look at it. We look at the operations center and say, maybe we put something there if that's where the fleet is. I think we're a little premature, even though the money's here now, the timing, I don't believe is exactly right. And then we'll be able to see better about where we are.
That's
with
fine.
that.
So we'll revisit. I'll go back and look at what's eligible and then we'll come back with a recommendation, so we can get a resolution. You know,
Can I
if,
ask a question about the community center since we're having, is there infrastructure regarding wiring and all of that stuff as part of the changeover in the? community
not that would
center?
accommodate this, no.
No, but I mean, just at all, is there like, because aren't you putting in different lighting, different whatever, is there?
I don't think that the upgrades for what we would be doing would be required. Andy, do you
Okay.
have
It's
you
just
know,
occurred to
thoughts?
me, I
I
don't
mean,
Yeah, so like obviously, we're gonna put it without dealing with the architectural firm and that upgrade. We are gonna be putting a new roof, we're putting new HVAC, and we're putting dehumidification in. Everything related to that is using the existing circuits.
Got it.
Anything that's obviously fluorescent in that building will be switched to LED, which will use less power.
Got it.
But like I said, those breakers are maxed out, and a lot of the capacity was used up with the pool, with the spray deck, with the systems, the chlorination systems, the pumping systems. That building itself has so much mechanical equipment, you know, 4 boilers to heat the water for the pool. It's maxed. The good thing is that we put a generator in that could run the whole entire facility. But the bad thing is we do not have the capacity. We don't have the capacity at the operations center. But we do have 4 chargers at the operations center. The old treatment plant, we have 2 level 2 chargers, and that place is maxed out, but we're building a new treatment plant.
Yeah, Andy, the question isn't about
Yeah,
chargers.
yeah.
The question was simply about
Capacity.
capacity in general, because we're going through a big renovation there. And I don't remember anybody ever talking about upgrading that stuff. And it sounds like it doesn't need to be because we have enough for what we have on the plan. Anything beyond that, we would have to do additions. Okay. Good
Correct.
information.
right. So we'll come back.
Thanks.
I'll look at that and then I'll let the board know. And depending on what it is, we'll either, you know, if we can figure out something that's in the existing capital plan, maybe we can get the resolution on and we can talk about new business next week. Just to get the ball rolling.
Okay, what else?
That concludes tonight's agenda.
No, no,
Oh,
no,
the special
no,
meeting. I'm
no.
sorry, the
We're not
special,
done.
we need to
Yeah.
adjourn to the special meeting.
Oh, you got it. Well, we have 3 votes. That's fine.
Okay, is there a motion there a motion to,
Okay, we're gonna continue. We have 3 votes. That's all we need.
is there a motion to adjourn work session to special meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are now in special meeting. It's 10:15 PM. Resolution A, accept donation from Marilyn Caden. Resolved that the superintendent of the Recreation and Parks Department is authorized to accept from Marilyn Caden of Ossining, New York, a donation of $500 for educational programs in the after-school program at the Joseph G. Caputo Community Center. And is further resolved that the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees gratefully acknowledges the donation to the Recreation and Parks Department. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Resolution B, adopt climate vulnerability assessment and adaptation, whereas the Village of Ossining pledged to take part in the New York State DEC Climate Smart Community Certification Program with pledges, including to address local climate threats, documenting the village's most vulnerable assets, and recommending strategies to protect the community and its assets from increasing climate risks. And whereas a climate vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan sets out to both document these vulnerable assets and set goals through concrete and prioritized initiatives, and to effectively address vulnerabilities related to the changing climate in our region. And whereas in the development of this plan, the village's Happy Adapt team, comprised of municipal officials and environmental volunteer community leaders, collaborated with municipal officials, key stakeholders, community residents, and neighboring municipalities participating in the Hudson Valley Regional Council's Climate Action Planning Institute Adaptation Cohort Program. And whereas the plan was publicly shared online and presented to the Village Board of Trustees and the public at the December 11, 2024 and February 19, 2025 Village Board meetings. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees hereby adopts this climate vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan, and be it further resolved that the municipal board authorizes submission of the document to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Office for Climate Change for consideration of points toward climate smart community certification for the Village of Ossining. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, do we have a motion to
Thank you, Mike.
adjourn
So
the
moved.
special meeting?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Maddie, thank you for all the work. Ladies and gentlemen, meetings adjourned. Have a good evening.